When did you become the very thing you swore to destroy? My 14-year-old self was proud, arrogant, and could get away with holding very strong opinions and could get away with being abrasive with them. Naturally, I had a lot of people who I marked as inferior or enemies. Today, I think it would be in the crosshairs of my past self. I used to have extremely strong moral principles to a ridiculous degree. I said I would never swear. Nowadays, I don't really have that barrier, but I also understand when to use it for effect. You lose that effect by swearing 24/7. I also said I would never ever be violent or even threaten violence. Later, I threatened my bully in front of the whole class, and I'm now learning martial arts, so I would have a last resort if push comes to shove. I used to insult depressed people, autistic and ADHD people for having little self-control. You get the idea. Guess who's seeking help now for mental health problems to get back on their feet? Let's just say that if my early teenage self saw who I was today, I'm the person he'd hate the most. I guess it only makes sense that out of the teens that I worked with, the few who seem to gradually dislike me for no reason are the ones who I see the most of my past teenage self in. Guess the only threat his past self sees now is the shadow of his own former arrogance. Story 2. Okay, this one is very personal, so it'll be hard to keep it short. I used to be really talented at music. Bragging is worthless and contains no real information, and I only want to give context to my perspective. So I'll just give some facts. All 4 years of high school, I made it into all 4 county and state honor bands, and after my sophomore year, was first chair in all of them. I turned down a full-ride scholarship to Berklee College of Music to go study under one of my idols at a different, similarly reputable school. My freshman year, I skipped all the undergrad ensembles and played lead or principal chair in the grad student groups. Philharmonia, concert band, jazz orchestra, chamber ensembles, etc. During my undergrad, I won all the school solo competitions. Made the podium in 2 international solo competitions while being the first contestant in 30 years to compete in both the jazz and classical competitions in the same year, and had the chance to play with such greats as Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Ravi Coltrane, Taylor Eichste, musicians who performed in major movie recordings, etc. Everywhere I went, I was constantly punching far above my weight for my age and receiving constant affirmation and open doors from very successful people around me. It might make your eyes roll for me to say this after listing all those things, but I was modest. That's the point of me writing this. It was easy for me to be. Never wanted to talk about my own accomplishments. I loved playing with people who were better than me. I never felt threatened by it. And I idolize humble heroes. I only later learned that being satisfied with who and what you are is a huge part of maintaining that attitude. It was hugely important to me to stay humble. Not only were all my heroes humble, but I saw a connection between that attitude and that pursuit of nirvana with your craft. These were some observations I made during that time in my life. Being modest isn't just about being polite. It is about not valuing praise over the thing itself. If you waste time trying to get everyone to praise you, you aren't practicing your craft. Playing music is the reward, not being complimented afterward. Being upset when someone is better than you is so backwards. The most successful people I ever got to play with didn't care if someone else was better. They relished it. I saw examples of this all over my real life and in stories. Goku was super talented but loved fighting with someone stronger than him. It made him grow and learn. It was truly fun to test his full ability against someone else. That's a productive and humble mindset. He never doubted his own worth. He just wanted to keep growing and make a positive difference in the world. Vegeta, on the other hand, was arrogant and fully preoccupied with needing to be better than everybody else. He frequently finished second place or worse. I saw the same thing happen in real life. People who were the best were happy and met every challenge with gusto. People who were petty and jealous let that get in the way of their own improvement and always struggled to keep up. Then, right before my master's degree, I had to have some dental surgery that changed the shape of the inside of my mouth. I almost completely lost my ability to play. My musicianship remained, but I had lost the physical lightning in a bottle that made it easy for me to play. Finishing my master's degree was hell. I did it, but I was limping by in last chair in almost every ensemble. No matter how hard I practiced, I never got it back. I worked my way back to being able to play at a decent level, but it always felt like running on a broken leg. Then I noticed myself begin to change. I became jealous of those who were still incredibly good. I dealt with frustration poorly in the practice room. Before, when I was frustrated at a challenge, I could believe in myself and try with full heart until I surpassed it. Now, when I couldn't get something to work like it had before, I became furious and sad. All the things I used to think were holding other musicians back were suddenly taking over my mind. It began to creep into my non-musical life, too. I discovered interpersonal problems I'd never experienced before. I had self-esteem issues, and even found out what feeling depressed can be like. That was years ago. I'm in a much better place now. I've learned to play music for pleasure without feeling crippling loss. I've regained my confidence and sense of self. The experience taught me a lot of harsh lessons. Mostly that it is easy to be humble when you have a lot of faith in yourself. It's like a beautiful person saying you shouldn't worry about your looks. Yeah, well, they never had to. I still believe in all the qualities my heroes exemplify: honesty, humbleness, bravery in meeting challenges, acceptance of one's own imperfections, etc. I only now know that it is much, much harder to embody those things when even your hardest work only results in mediocre results. However, I believe that trying is worth it for personal growth anyway. When a person has learned to accept and believe in themselves, whether they're highly skilled or not, they've achieved the same golden reward anyway. Happiness, the joy of experiencing the beauty of life, and wisdom are not locked behind a certain threshold of achievement. This is what I fear about aging, no longer being able to do the things you once could do with ease. Story 3. Oh man, this touched a big nerve. For me, it was ballet, not music. I was extremely good as a teenager, and it was my plan for my whole life. I had auditions set up for schools and companies right out of high school, ones that reached out to me, not the other way around. And if you were involved in ballet in my hometown, you knew who I was. This isn't a brag, just context. I was only good because I loved it, and I didn't care about recognition. I just wanted to be able to do it forever. And then I broke the growth plates in my knee, and it never healed right. But I couldn't dance anymore. Not like I used to anyway. I still loved it. I could still do it to an extent, but the high level of technicality I had would never be there again. There were some things that were now completely off limits for me. It became apparent very quickly that I wouldn't ever be able to do this professionally. I watched people I used to dance with get the opportunities I never could. And I became jealous and bitter and mean. I punished myself for having the accidents in the first place, slid pretty deeply into an eating disorder, and lost all my ballet friends because I was so impossible to be around. I don't blame them. I don't like who I was then either. I was furious because this wasn't supposed to happen to me. That was years ago though. I don't dance anymore because my knee still can't take it, but I've reached out to some people who knew me back then who are now enjoying moderate to high levels of success. One dances with Oz Ballet now, and is working his way up to being a principal with him. I'm not in a related field, but I'm proud of my career. I guess the lesson I learned is how to cope with crushing disappointment, and how sometimes terrible things happen and it's nobody's fault. I'm very resilient now. That's what makes me so good at my job. Wallowing in self-pity is unattractive and useless. You gotta pick yourself up, stop blaming everyone, and try a different tack. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 4. Ex-atheist Christian here. So I was raised Christian only in the sense that Jesus and God were about as important as Santa. I remember as a child, once I figured out Santa wasn't real, beginning to question if God was a big lie made up by adults as well. By the time I reached adolescence, I realized I had no real reason to believe in God and began identifying as an atheist. I believe in no gods. I pondered the subject greatly and decided that it made much more sense that all religions were wrong rather than one being right, that there was no hard evidence for God, and that everything in the Bible sounded like absolute nonsense, especially in the light of my education in the sciences. The thing is that I understood that nothing could possibly matter but the answer to the question, do I have a purpose? And I never stopped seeking if there was an answer. Nothing else was worth seeking, so I never stopped thinking about that very subject. All the conclusions I came to, everything I saw pointed to religion being utter nonsense. Religious being the foolish and the uneducated, and that all of life and existence was some random accident that just happened to occur and would be over as soon as it started. I never questioned that stance until the day I had a good friend talk to me. They didn't have incredible thought-provoking statements. He didn't have nearly any answers, but he had faith. I was mocking this man to the face for the beliefs he held dearest, and he was brushing aside my rudeness as if it were leaves in his path. His message was clear. It was that he knew that there was a God and that he was Jesus Christ. He confessed himself that he didn't have all the answers, but he knew religious leaders I could talk to that did. He was sure. I laughed off the entire conversation at that moment, but I distinctly remember in the moments before I fell asleep that night, asking myself, could I have been wrong all this time? It was the first time I was no longer 100% sure there was no God, and it opened a new chapter in my life. I'd spent years finding every single reason to not believe in God, but had never taken the time to consider that there might actually be reasons to think that he exists. and I began to see them. The fact that the theme of human existence is the struggle between good and evil points directly towards him. Without God defining good and evil, all of our struggles, all of our dreams, all of our desires, all of our love, all of it was just a bunch of complex chemical reactions. Everything I knew told me that all we experience and live is real. It's tangible. I was living it. Not only this, but I realized that this universe was made so that life, the only thing that could give existence meaning and purpose, could and would occur. Whatever caused this universe to happen made it so that it could and would have purpose. That demands sentience. That demands God. These thoughts continued for a month until I realized one day that it was true. It was all true. There was a God, and his love for us was so evident. The love of a God that puts breath in our lungs, the love of a God that lets the sun shine on our backs, the love of a God that lets us look into our loved ones' eyes is the same God that multitudes had claimed to have witnessed to walk this earth in the flesh and lay down his life to save us. Everything became so clear at that moment. That night was the most incredible night of my life as I fell on my knees in repentance of my sins, willing to follow Jesus as my Lord. I received the Holy Spirit and was born a new man who put all of his sin behind him in that moment. I went to all those in my life, all those I had instilled my brand of atheism into, and professed to them that I was wrong and that they needed to repent as well. I had found myself in the midst of a group that was getting more heavily involved in crime to fuel our usage. I was laughed at and quickly found myself living my days alone. It's been quite a few years since that day, and I now find myself in a thriving church community that is living in obedience to Jesus. I couldn't even begin to explain to you the joy and mirth of knowing your Creator, of knowing your purpose, and of knowing your family that you will go to spend eternity with. This world is just the beginning that only those who are willing to repent of their sin and obey God will find eternal paradise to be their end. If I hadn't found Jesus, I know I would have been found guilty at the judgment of my sin and justly been condemned to an eternal hell for what I had done. My Creator loved me enough to give me a second chance, loved me enough to seek me and show me his love, loved me enough to walk the earth in the flesh and end at the hands of his own creation so that he could pour out his blood as payment for what I had done. He rose from the afterlife to the witness of hundreds and has given his spirit to countless thousands so that we could know that this was the truth. Story 5. I had nightmares about my wife, who I hid from my religious organization that I'd otherwise devoted my life to, suffering and pain and fading. I learned from a friend the tragedy of another man who had done everything he could to control life, but ironically, couldn't save himself. The power to save life was forbidden to our religion, and none would teach the power to me. And when I realized that my friend and later mentor, in fact, did practice those forbidden arts, I reported him to the council. My friend first would have been subject to a trial, but because he was the Senate and would decide his own fate, the councilors decided that he was dangerous, and he easily ended 3 of the 4 arresting him, and was finally defeated by the last of them. I arrived and realized it isn't in the way of our religion to judge who should live or end, no matter how powerful, especially when his victim was so weak. So I leaped in as the final counselor. Think Samuel L. Jackson type, cool guy, miss him, tried to finish him and took his hands off. My soon-to-be mentor used his powers. After that, I pledged myself to his leadership, as I realized that my religion was hypocritical at best and evil at worst. In fact, they were evil. My master taught me to deal in absolutes. He turned the army and the treasonous and heretical religion, and I personally made sure that none of the children were poisoned by it. And we began to reconstruct the fragmented government into a new empire. I went to meet with a separatist faction, and with my negotiation skills, I quickly came to an agreement with them, as they were already pawns for my new master anyways. And my former mentor showed up, my pregnant wife with him. He claimed I was the evil one, and turned my wife against me. I pleaded with her as he manipulated the circumstances, eventually leading her to be in such poor condition. He then attacked me, utilizing the high ground to his advantage. When he left me for good, burning in lava, I thought back to what he had said. Perhaps I had become the thing I swore to destroy, but I made that vow not knowing that my old religious cult was evil, that it would end in my wife's passing. I couldn't save her, but I relied on my anger, and with my mentor, the Emperor, we created a strong government and spread peace throughout the empire. It may have become the thing I swore to destroy, but in the end, I believe it worked better for everyone. If only I had started sooner, I could have saved Padme, raised my family with her in peace under our new rule.
You were the chosen one, Anakin. It was said you would destroy the Sith, not join them.
Story 6. Worked in a grocery store for about 3 years after coming to the US. Most people that worked there seemed to look down on people that worked in fast food places, so me being a stupid 16-year-old said, my only promise to myself is that I'll never work fast food. I had to move away from that area after I graduated from high school in the middle of the pandemic. And I couldn't find a job anywhere, so I decided to try and get a job at McDonald's. Because my illogical, as unnecessary pride wasn't going to pay my bills. Managed to get a maintenance job that pays 1/3 more than I used to get before, and I'm basically doing most of the same tasks. The people that work there are amazing in their own way, too. Being there helped me realize that nobody should feel better than anyone else based on how they put their food on the table. This life is disordered, and every one of us is only trying to see another day, for our loved ones and ourselves. Story 7. Bankers fall into the dark side. Started a punk rock band with college pulse-high buddies when 18, sworn to take down capitalism and being true equality. We're now 30 and still playing, but bassist is a trader, the drummer is a banker, and I'm a portfolio manager. Looks like we've always had similar interests. Our fairly recognized song is a crowd chant where it goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, take it down. Now I have a 401k that I'm trying hard to grow. In my profession, I rely on capitalism so that people's pension funds can meet payment obligations for the future. It's a lot of work, but I get paid pretty well and live in a nicer neighborhood now. The recent GameSpot stock surge was like taking candy from a baby. Taxes are kind of hard to deal with, so I'm always trying to find new ways to avoid or deduct them. Obi-Wan would be frowning at this. Along the way in my profession, I met an investment banker who is now my wife. Her bank abuses the tax incentives for green energy to churn instant profits. These profits, being her bonuses, get converted to her Tiffany jewelry and Chanel bags. I ask if it bothers her that the profits come from the cost of taxpayers. She says that it's because the 99% are stupid. We have fallen to the dark side. Story 8. Kind of late, but I sunk back down into poverty after trying to rid my family, namely my mother, from that stress. I was a first-generation college student in my family, and we were relatively poor growing up. Still had a good life, but we didn't have much money to go around with 5 kids and a single mom. I did well in high school, so I gave college a chance. I haven't been doing great mentally and I can't afford therapy or meds, and it really affected my academics. Semester went downhill and I lost my loans. Now I owe $9,000 in order to go back to school, which I can't feasibly pay back anytime soon. Trying to afford rent, car maintenance or insurance, phone bills, food, and all else really bad a minimum wage. Especially when your credit is bad, so no private loans for me. I wanted to beat poverty and I swore to myself that I'd help my mom out of there too once I got a good job. Instead, I let my emotions get the best of me for a semester, only to ruin my chance at a degree. Now I have all of that debt knocking on my door with nothing to show for it. Not at least for the next 15 years. I have a few more days to try and come into that money, so maybe I'll cherish the $50 left in my bank account by buying some lottery tickets. Story 9. I go to a conservative church. I love my church. The people are great. However, I started to notice a growing radicalization among our teenage boys. It's weird to have teenage boys in church, and even weirder to have teenage boys really into theology. So the boys were petted, praised, and seen as amazing. Everyone seemed to think it was great, but no one seemed to realize these guys had become ultra-conservative, more interested in establishing new rules and order than concentrating on Jesus. They became little Pharisees. I watched it happen and decided to challenge the leadership about it, concerned for the boys themselves and how they were affecting the girls. The youth leader gaslit me for years. He would say he agreed with me, but then kept pushing ultra-conservative views on me. I was aware of their manipulation at first and thought I was so smart and he wouldn't get to me. But it did. I soon found myself falling more and more into that trap. It was only when my family were talking about a topic that I used to agree passionately with, I found myself disagreeing and saying the ultra-conservative side. I knew that I had been worn down. I was talking to the young boys one day and we were talking about the church elections for committees. I mentioned I would leave the church if women would not be allowed into those leadership roles, which was what the ultra-conservatives were pushing. One of the guys turns to me and says, "You're allowed to vote. That's all the responsibility a woman should have in the church." It cut me deep. I then went outside and noticed the youth were in an area they weren't allowed in. The youth pastor then asked me to go and shout at them. I realized that he always made me do all the dirty work. This man, who preached that strong men need to run the church and women should be silent, couldn't even shoo some children. I went and shooed the kids and then had a wee cry in a room. Boom, church elder appears. Church elder is also a therapist. I'm like, I just wanted to cry this out so it doesn't make me deal with my emotions. He makes me deal with my emotions. So it all just came pouring out how I was tired of being in a church that didn't believe I had a voice worth listening to. I'm tired of being treated like a second-class citizen because I'm a girl, but expected to do the dirty work. I'm just so done. Magic Church elder therapist is like, what in the actual world, our church agrees with women in leadership. Why do you think we're going to change that? It was at that point I realized I'd been gaslit to think this ultra-conservative group were the majority and people like me were the minority. Church elder is angry. Why are our kids being brainwashed? He gets me calmed down and sends me on my way. Over the next few days, loads of the women in my church, especially the mothers, come to me and say they agree with my cause. The revolution begins. A minister casually decides to do a sermon on why women are allowed to be in leadership, making it clear where the church stands. The church elects 10 new people to the committee, 8 of whom are women. The committee is now 50-50. Any illusions that it's a liberal few pushing women in leadership is shattered. The kids mellow out as they're faced with a real world. Youth pastor leaves and then hires a woman. Old youth pastor even admits she was the best candidate by far. The youth dynamic shifts. That's how I became what I hate and then rediscovered what I believed and accidentally started the revolution by crying within earshot of a church elder therapist.
What is the worst thing that has ever happened to you in a relationship? He left his MySpace open on my laptop and I snooped. He had been selling himself on Craigslist for gay unprotected intimacy. He was also an insane socialist supporter and had an entire secret profile dedicated to a dictator and was posting horrible videos and other hate crimes. I was young and he had gotten me pregnant, which I thought was a burst protection, but he posted that he poked holes in all his protection to do it on purpose. I had a miscarriage at 10 weeks due to the stress of finding all this out at once. I immediately dumped him and got myself tested and couldn't freaking believe it. But I was clean. He got my name tattooed on him after we broke up in an attempt to win me back. When that didn't work, he robbed a Radio Shack that he worked at for money to buy me an engagement ring. He went to jail and for my latest snooping, appears to have gotten his crap together. Wish him the best, but holy crap, what a rough time that was. Story 2. My ex took substances at a rave. I only got intoxicated. Went to a city 4 hours away to the rave with a crew. He became violent and erratic. It was bizarre. Anyways, drove him home the entire time he was saying voices were telling him to hurt me the whole way back home. I drove him to his grandpa's house and then he chased me and announced he was going to harm me. I called his parents and my mom, crying. My mom came and the neighbors called the cops. Like 8 cop cars came and an ambulance tackled him, took him to a mental ward, diagnosed him with type 2 bipolar mood disorder. I was on the phone with my friends. I went begging them to tell me if he was on substances. I told his parents in the hospital or paramedics. His mega religious parents blamed me for putting substances into their boy. Mind you, he was a 220-pound beast. I was 22 and 120 pounds. I told him what happened because he didn't remember. He wanted to get back together. He never corrected his parents. And was excited to invite me to a family wedding as long as I apologized to his parents for what I did, specifically his mom. I was so done. I broke up with him on the spot. I know it sounds so evil to admit I relished in his ugly crying and whys of confusion. This was 2 years after the event and dealing with his parents constantly criticizing me. I was so done with his excuses for his parents saying I was the devil. Story 3. Unbeknownst to me, the girl I was dating had links to organized crime in our city. She used to supplement her income with dealing and organizing escorts for guys. We had a big argument over the phone. She got intoxicated and fell down the stairs in her house. She called up her friends and told them I had pushed her so they came over to sort me. Fortunately, or unfortunately, they got the wrong house and attacked my neighbors. The police were called and multiple arrests were made. The police later raided my girlfriend's house. Large quantities of substances were found and she ended up doing time. In 2013, she crashed her car while out of her mind on booze and substances and was pronounced departed at the scene. Story 4. He passed away. He wasn't feeling great all week. His pressure was really high. Told him to go to the doctor, go to the fire station next door. Didn't listen. Started feeling like crap on Monday and passed away Friday night. He came in from the garage to see when dinner would be done. We danced in the kitchen and I sent him outside for another 30 minutes. I found him asleep on the garage floor when I went out to tell him dinner was ready. Wondered why he lay down in the garage to nap instead of coming inside. I realized his lips were blue. Called 911 and started CPR. The fire station was next door, so they were there in less than a minute. They said he had a pulse, so I went inside to pack a few things for the hospital. Someone came inside to tell me it was all over. He was only 41. Lost him almost 5 years ago. Our 20th anniversary would be next week. I'm taking the day off from work to do something we would have enjoyed. Story 5. I met my now ex-wife in 2018 and we married in 2022. The high point of a loving, fun, happy relationship. In 2023, she had a burst of success in her career as a stage actor. Got a huge ego and decided she could have whatever she wanted. So she started dating a female colleague of ours while we were, by her own admission, still happily married, fell in love, and decided she didn't want to be married to a man anymore. I went from happily kissing my wife every morning to realizing I needed to move out within a matter of days. This sucked, of course, but I'm not even getting started. Because this all went down while we were rehearsing for a stage show, we were starring opposite each other. By the time the show opened, it was clear our marriage was over. Every night, twice a night on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I had to go through a scene where her character aggressively criticizes me, often with the audience joining in. Then she forgives me and we get married on stage. I did this 22 times while I knew my marriage was over. She was absolutely horrible about feeling out boundaries during this period, and not only did she bring her girlfriend to the show multiple times, they parked at a table right outside the dressing room, so the only way for me to get backstage was to walk by them or go straight through the audience. I was having uncontrollable crying fits and panic attacks between acts, and a couple of people even asked if I was cruel or cheating because they couldn't believe someone could be so vindictive. But she wasn't being vindictive. She's just a narcissist, and I was too shocked and traumatized to stick up for myself. On the last night of the show, I was freaking out and wishing I could just pilot my body like a mech suit and just stop feeling anything. And then it actually happened. My body was going to the right places. My voice was singing the right notes, but the world was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. It was honestly awesome. Like my entire nervous system was finally giving me a break from being harmed for 2 weeks. I told my therapist about this, calling it my first flow state as a performer. She identified it as a dissociative episode, a symptom of PTSD, and it happened a couple more times at different gigs, and it was way less awesome. The whole thing was by far the worst experience of my life, and it just kept going for 2.5 weeks. Until the show closed and I had to dive full steam to separating my life from the woman I was sure I'd grow old with. I hear she's been leaning hard into cosplaying as a lesbian by getting a hideous buzz cut, which has screwed up her casting prospects. She also managed to get fired from her job for being a generally awful NPD person. Story 6. My ex used to be in love with this girl he barely knew years before he was with me. He took her rejection hard, but I never knew the full extent of it until years later. A couple of years ago, days before my 30th birthday, he ran into her randomly. He then proceeded to text his friend things about how he's not over her, how good she looked, he's not attracted to me anymore, he feels trapped in the relationship, wants to try things with her again, etc. And text her as well. Meanwhile, it was completely one-sided and she hasn't even thought about him in years. Shortly after this happened, I found a letter in her home that he wrote years ago, right after they broke up. That was written to her that he never got rid of. It wasn't a nice letter about how much he loved her. No, it was an angry, graphically violent, hate-filled letter about how she's nothing more than a worthless witch who deserves to pass away and all the ways in which he wants to harm her. I couldn't believe this was the person I had been living with for the last 2 years. He tried to downplay it like it was no big deal and was from a long time ago, and begged me not to tell her or anyone, which I stupidly listened until a year later, when I saw he was still following her on Instagram after I threatened to tell her if he even so much as looked in her direction ever again. We met up for coffee and I told her everything, exposing his secret, where she thanked me and proceeded to immediately block him on everything. It was an extremely healing moment for me. Story 7. We talked a lot about having children through the relationship. She told me it would happen after we got married, bought her a huge ring, paid for the destination wedding, then it became after the honeymoon, 3 weeks in Europe, which I understood. Honeymoon was a solid 8 months after the wedding. Intimacy dried up after the wedding. The day after the honeymoon was over, she told me she didn't know if she wanted kids. We discussed this for another 5 months where she refused to decide. I told her finally she had to go live with her mother until she figured it out. She came back and told me that it wasn't that she didn't want kids, but that I would be a bad father, and she then packed her things and left. I think it was likely a combination of factors, but she was hoping the desire to have kids would grow, but it never did. 7 years of my life. Story 8. I was 18 years old and was not on speaking terms with my family. I moved in with my boyfriend, and a month later, there was a knock at the door. It was a young woman asking for my boyfriend. I made myself scarce and went into the kitchen, trying not to be jealous. She yells, "You know I'm pregnant with him?" Punched to the gut. I still went on to marry and have a child with him before realizing what an awful situation I'd gotten myself into. Seriously, parents who bail on their kids at 18 suck. Left me to my own devices. I had no trusted confidant or friends to give me sound advice. I wouldn't wish circumstances like that on anyone. Story 9. He talked me into giving up my awesome apartment that I stupidly let him move into once his lease ended, to move to another town with him. We couldn't really afford the new apartment. He needed my name in the lease to even get it. His mom was not disabled or incompetent, just a very scared, pitiful little woman who wouldn't work or live alone. So she moved in with us. I took care of her, cooked and cleaned. He came home from work one day talking about his work wife and asked if it would be an issue. He said of course not. Then he increasingly started being a schmuck. 4 months later, he told me I needed to find a new place to live. When I went to get my things and my cats, he had his mom guarding him like I was some crazy person. I felt so unbelievable and disrespectful after our years together. I felt like I was being disposed of without a care in the world. He packed my stuff and his mom kept some of my things. I just wanted away so badly at that point I didn't bother with it. I found a little apartment in my hometown and he moved his work wife in and married her. He strung me along on an engagement for a long time. I'm still single and very happy with it, honestly. Story 10. The amount of messed up things my ex did to me, I could write a book. This one is definitely on the podium. My ex tried renting me out to his buddies without my knowledge or consent. 3 of his friends. They paid $75 to $150 each. Imagine my horror when I'm in bed watching YouTube and his best friend comes into the bedroom and starts casually doing stuff. Imagine my even bigger horror after I freaked the hell out and kicked friend out. Friend went to my ex and their 2 other friends demanding his money back. I followed behind with a tennis racket, screaming at my ex's friend to get the hell out of my house. He's still screaming about his $150. I enter the living room and my ex and their other friends are still standing there with their Johnsons out. Like he straight up planned to have his friends run on a train on me and I was just supposed to go, okay. I'll never forget the straight primal fear that I might have to fight 4 men to get out. But they all walked out after getting their refunds. My ex rationalized it by telling me that if I really loved him, I'd do anything for him, and he needed beer money. Story 11. She said yes to my proposal, not because she actually wanted to be with me, but because she thought getting married was something she was supposed to do. I.e., that's what people do, go to school, grow up, get married. Other women her age were married already. She didn't want to be the only one not good enough to have a husband, etc. Trying to make a good marriage with someone who doesn't actually want to be with you is a special kind of hell. That's okay though. After 24 years, she finally came clean and admitted she did not want to be with me and filed for divorce. Nicest thing she ever did. Story 12. My partner of over a decade confessed that he'd gotten a girl pregnant, and he was 30 years old. He only confessed because she had already had the baby and he'd already had the paternity test, which confirmed he was the father and that he'd have to start paying child support. This meant not only was he cheating on me, but he obviously wasn't using protection. It's a miracle I never caught an STD. It's truly one of the most shocking moments of my life when he confessed. I didn't cry or scream, I was just stunned. He then tried to convince me that this could potentially be a good thing, saying it would be kind of like we had our own kid. Except it wouldn't be anything like having our own kid. This child has a mother who isn't me and wouldn't even be living with us the vast majority of the time. We separated for several months, but because of how long we had been together, all our shared experiences, memories, and history, I was stupid and gave him a second chance to see if we could salvage the relationship. Once we were back together, he became very verbally and emotionally cruel, and I found out he was still cheating on me. I'd never been the type of person to snoop through my partner's things, but I became that paranoid person who was constantly going through his phone, computer, work bag, and pants pockets. That's how I found out the cheating had been going on for years, with many different girls. Looking back, there were red flags, but hindsight is 20/20, of course. I finally ended things for good due to the cheating, knowing he would never stop. The fact that we would have this child in our lives that was the result of his infidelity, emotional cruelty, and some other really messed up stuff that happened. When I was packing my things to leave, he begged me not to go and had the audacity to say he couldn't believe I was throwing our relationship away. Didn't care about our relationship. We just wanted someone to pay half the bills, clean the house, run errands, and take care of the pets. I'm thankful it finally left. Story 13. My first boyfriend canceled to meet up with me at the last minute. I found out he canceled to meet my childhood best friend. He then broke up with me and immediately started dating her. I found out they slept together through a mutual friend. They split up about 3 weeks after getting together. He got back in touch with me. I still loved him and believed all the nice things he said. We fooled around. When he got what he wanted, he became nasty with me again. I told him I missed my time with a month and he accused me of lying. I went for termination. I refused to come at first. I needed a guardian figure, so I asked someone I was friendly with. It was another guy. I trusted him and he was very supportive. My ex found out and accused me of trying to make him jealous. He said he'd come with me, but I needed to find a different guardian. Just before the termination, he said we could start fresh once I went through with it. Afterward, he said he didn't want to be with me anymore because it was too much. I finally cut him off. I won't lie, I loudly badmouthed him to anyone who would listen. I really didn't care anymore. I got back in touch months later and tried to make amends. His new girlfriend had recently broken up with him and I felt bad for him. He then found out the reason his girlfriend had broken up with him was because she discovered how he had treated me. He told me to tell her everything I said about him was a lie. So yeah, screw that dude. Story 14. He was convinced that I had bulimia and went to my parents to convince them before ever confronting me. I denied it because it wasn't true, but no one believed me. He threatened to leave me if I didn't admit it, and made me explain and recount certain events in the past where he thought I ratcheted after I ate. He gaslit me so bad that I even second-guessed myself. I was young and didn't want to lose him, so I considered just going along with it so it would all stop and we could go back to normal. To this day, I'm traumatized that people don't believe me about things and I need concrete evidence, cameras, paper trails, witnesses to back me up because my word isn't good enough. Story 15. Oh, I've got a great one. I just deployed to Afghanistan in the army during the surge. I called her after a week on Skype and heard she was in the airport from the background noise. I asked her where she was going casually, and she told me, "I'm flying to go see this guy I met so I can know what we have is real." It took me a second to process that sentence. I told her that not getting on the plane would be your indicator, and if you're in a place with this relationship that you need to do this, then I'll make it easier for you and just break up with you. Good luck with that. And I hung up with her and blocked her on everything. She would send me emails detailing how great it was and how much better he was than me, and I'd just keep blocking emails. Within about a month or so, she was emailing me from different accounts again, apologizing and wanting to explain and get back together. Apparently, the guy 3 states over with a fiancé and the toddler at home did not in fact turn out to be the right choice. The amount of effort she put out reduced over time. It took a few years. It's been a couple years now since she's tried to reach out to me. No need to say sorry. I know I dodged an intercontinental ballistic missile there. Story 16. I found out an ex had a friend one summer when I was out of town. Later found out it was more than that. Someone shared emails showing they talked crap about me all the time. They were so close, people thought we broke up. When I got back in town, she was too busy doing something with him to get together with me. We'd been together almost 2 years at that point. It was so blatant, even my dad commented that it was messed up and he never paid attention to that kind of crap. I had to wait. I was young and lacked enough self-respect to walk away. I waited and spent the next few months pretending everything was fine. I did the old, what am I doing wrong shtick. I wasn't perfect, but don't treat me like some schmuck. I was mad at her for years. As I got older, I've been more mad at myself for taking it. That said, she still was terrible and didn't deserve to be treated like that. It's not a very juicy or exciting example, but it messed me up for a while. Story 17. Reconnected with a guy I'd known as a kid. I was told he and his wife were coming to the end of a lengthy divorce. It became official. He added his name to my existing lease and we upgraded to a bigger apartment. Spent the weekend at his parents' where he'd have this time with his 3 kids. We'd moved fast, but I agreed with meeting the kids at a slower pace. Between being gone a night here and there as a truck driver, he was at the apartment 3 to 4 nights a week. We started talking about getting a house together and visited a couple open houses. Finally, one day, I opened up a piece of his mail, which ended up being bank loan stuff in regards to the house he and his wife had just purchased. Things hit the fan, and over a speakerphone conversation, he told me he didn't know me and I was crazy for saying we lived together. It was like the Twilight Zone. I've been through some doozies, but was my first early 20s dumb as hell relationship mistake. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 18. We were having some issues regarding intimacy, and it was a huge insecurity for me, but I was trying really hard and working on it, and then she told me she was having issues being attracted to me. So I spent that night crying on the couch through the night, and apparently, me crying woke her up, so she walks over, asks me what's wrong, and I tell her, and she goes, "I thought we already talked about that." So I say, "Yeah, but I'm still really upset." So she says, "Okay, well, you're being loud," and proceeds to shut the door and go back to sleep while I'm still in the middle of a breakdown. Story 19. I had a flight back home from visiting my family, arriving home on my 21st birthday. I've been with my ex-partner for about 2 years, and we've been living together for over a year. I planned to be home on my birthday so we could be together and celebrate. I landed around noon and called him to pick me up from the airport, really looking forward to seeing him. I hadn't heard from him all day despite letting him know when I was boarding, my arrival time, and that there were no delays. Then when I called, he didn't pick up. His phone was off. I called again and texted. No response. I ended up calling my best friend and having her pick me up from the airport, then waited over 5 hours at her house before hearing anything from him. I later found out that, according to his story, he'd gone out the night before and had gone so hammered he couldn't find our apartment keys. He tried to kick down the door, splintered our door frame. The cops were called on him because he scared the hell out of our 70-plus-year-old neighbor who had lived next door to us for over 20 years. Somehow he was arrested. The cops just helped him find his keys. I also found out that while I was gone, he had brought random guys he met at bars, still not sure about this, over and was smoking cigarettes with them inside the apartment. They did nothing for my birthday. No gifts, no card, barely acknowledged it, and no dinner. Honestly, I was like, okay, you actually just hate me. I should have left then, but it was the beginning of the inevitable death spiral to the end. Many other similarly awful things happened in the following months before we entangled ourselves from each other, but this one stung pretty bad. Story 20. I came out of work one day and he had just moved me and my son into his home, which was mid-renovation. No flooring, bare drywall, just in really bad shape. Turns out he needed money to finish it, and that was me. I went into shock, doing the best I could, and he spent the next 3 months going absolutely crazy. Turns out he had no teeth, having pulled them all 6 years prior because teeth led to health issues. So he wore full dentures at 40. Surprise. He talked to Jesus, saw Mary in the bathroom tiles, and became convinced that I was cheating on him with everyone, including my own son, which was so gross. He wouldn't let me in the front yard, wouldn't let me walk the road, wouldn't let me open windows or doors. I couldn't go anywhere without him. I had my work desk in the living room, and there were cameras everywhere. My son wasn't allowed upstairs, and I wasn't allowed downstairs. He said if my son tried to take him, he'd walk away with no legs. But that's not a threat, sure. He called me awful names and would scream at me for an hour if I looked out the car windows or made eye contact with a man in public. He would take my debit and credit cards, making thousands of dollars in home renovation purchases that I didn't agree to, but apparently he needed to see my buy-in. He made me pay for everything. There was extreme cruelty. He didn't hit me, but threw things and punched walls. One day after 3 months of this insanity, with my son and his mom there, because it was the only way he would be safe as we left, we packed up suitcases and left. I moved in with my parents, $50,000 in debt from him, with severe anxiety and PTSD as well. I went to file police reports and found out that nothing he did was illegal because he didn't physically lock me inside, and apparently, I could have left at any time. And yeah, I could have, but I was frozen. He made it so I was completely broke, taking my credit score from 790 to 570 in less than 2 months, so I couldn't even rent an apartment. He laughed when I cried about that. I told him I couldn't leave because of that, and he laughed. I didn't want to move in with my parents, who thought he was great because he would be so sweet around them. The second they turned their back, he'd call me a witch, ask me why I am the lemon in the family, and say, being with you is so freaking embarrassing, but God told me you have to do it. So yeah, I'm still living with my parents at 47 years old, trying to rebuild my life from the negatives. I knew him and was in love with him for 2 years before the move, and in that 2 years and 3 months, he almost ruined my life. I'm honestly thinking about writing a book, but don't know who'd want to read something so awful. Don't ignore the red flags, people. Story 21. I endured 6 years of emotional and physical cruelty due to her issues with alcohol. She's one of those people who, as soon as alcohol graces their lips, becomes an absolute monster. An immediate mood change, literally after the first sip. She even looked physically different in her face. Think Luan Platter's mom from King of the Hill. That's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. It was such a long time to be with someone, so when I finally kicked her out, I was completely lost but felt liberated. I finally restarted my life at 34 and I'm doing very well. Though my attempts at relationships since have been fruitless, I chalk it up to being more sensitive to red flags, which is good because I'm absolutely terrible at ending relationships. However, it has made me overly hesitant to allow myself to be vulnerable in the first place. I probably ruined a good opportunity just from not wanting to let someone in, but it is what it is. I'm content with my life now. Story 22. I was in a relationship with M and met T at a friend's party. T and I agreed that this was just a friendship. One day T was in town. All of us went to a few shops but lost track of each other, and T and I were left, so I texted M that T and I were going to a meetup place, and found us and accused me of liking T more than him. I was heartbroken that he was so angry, and luckily, my friend T was sleeping over at my house, so I thought, at least I have a friend with me. T essayed me that night. I passed out and woke up to a Facebook update saying M changed his relationship status from in a relationship to single. Story 23. My spouse of 10 years had a midlife crisis. Instead of buying a convertible or something, he chose to cheat on me months after I gave birth to our second son. She was half his age and barely 21. He left me for her. I was trying to survive the early days, an infant and a toddler in tow. Needless to say, I was completely blindsided. But wait, there's more. While I was reeling from what just happened, he made his rounds with all of her friends and family, spinning some BS story, ultimately trying to convince them this was somehow my fault. I didn't want to look like the bad guy. I honestly don't know if I believe in romantic love anymore. Story 24. I'll lay my experience out in timeline form to make everything clear. October 2020, my wife tripped me and fell at home, resulting in a spiral fracture in her tibia. We saw an orthopedic surgeon who, due to her being pre-diabetic, recommended surgery instead of casting. He wanted to avoid any pressure sores developing under a cast. November 2nd, she was admitted for surgery, which went well with no complications. On the second day of her recovery, she developed pneumonia, and her O2 stats would slowly drop without a cannula. I gave her nebulizer treatments and were able to clear the pneumonia. However, at random times, her O2 would drop again. She was placed in a ventilator, as that was the only way her O2 would remain stable. Over the next week, they tried to wean her off the vent, but eventually her O2 stats would start dropping again. She was then moved to a long-term care facility where they continued to work on weaning her off the vent. About 3 months later, they were able to keep her O2 up with just a cannula, and she was transferred to a recovery facility. End of March 2021. It started again. Her O2 would drop, and she developed pneumonia once more. She was transferred back to the ER and remained there for a week. Easter Sunday 2021, I received a call from the hospital informing me that she had just passed away. So, roughly speaking, I spent November through April visiting her daily. The amount of stress this caused, the constant ups and downs, took a severe toll on me, almost to the point of unaliving myself as I felt I had nothing else to live for. While it was the worst thing that could have happened, it also resulted in the best thing. I managed to lose over 160 pounds over the next 2 years and started really focusing on my health. Story 25. My husband left me and his children after 16 years of marriage. Without warning or discussion, I'd just been diagnosed with an illness and he split. My children and I were eating from food banks while he was putting down over $60,000 a year. It was a horrible experience. It decimated what was left of my health and destroyed his children's entire world. The man even insisted on taking their phone number. I lost everything I had ever worked for, and the kids lost their security of 2 parents and a home. They're grown now, and I've got no contact with him. He stopped speaking to me the day he left us. Needless to say, my mental health took a beating. I'm not the person I was before, and that is sad, but we have 5 grandchildren who really don't know who he is, so I feel it's now more sad for him. Story 26. She cheated on me with a group of guys I had been palling around with for about a year and a half. I didn't even find out until after we had a mutual breakup. About a month later, I was at the bars one night when the whole group of guys basically socially ambushed me and started taunting me into doing something stupid. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even apologize, just gave me some BS excuse that she was just chasing stupid urges. I used to be an emotional rock who could shrug off anything, but that happened in 2019 and I'm still dealing with some insecurity and anxiety issues from it. Don't cheat on people, y'all. It's a very messed up thing to do to someone, even if you hate them with all your guts. I would wish my experience on my worst enemy. Story 27. After 7 years of trying, from ages 19 to 26 and catching him in over 50 lies, he broke up with me for the 5th time. After we got back together for the 3rd time, I asked to hold off on intimacy until we felt emotionally safe, and he was still being dishonest and I wanted some time to feel safe with him and trust him. He agreed, but I caught him one night at a motel. He lied for months about what he was doing there. We went to watch Netflix on his laptop and searches for street workers came up. He still denied seeking these workers. A couple of months later, he finally came clean. He was there to have intimacy, film it, and send me the video as punishment. He said he thought it might end it all, but that wasn't enough to deter him from going through with it. And that really hurt. He swears he never followed through, but many parts of his story weren't adding up, so I questioned him for a week. He didn't like that, so he dumped me. We got back together a month later, and he was still lying about many things. So I didn't trust his good behavior, even though he sobbed, begging me to believe him. He dumped me the day after talking about the house we wanted to buy and the kids we wanted to have because listening to a priest made him feel like I was emotionally safe to be with. He then blocked me off everything. Story 28. I found out my ex was trying to cheat on me with both women and men after claiming to be a straight male. I wish I could say this was what caused me to break up with him, but his manipulation in my young age led me to believe he was a mistake and that he never actually cheated. So it took several months later to officially end the relationship. Also, not sure if this counts, but the worst was probably when I was a teen and found out my closest family member, my cousin who was only a year younger than me, was catfishing me for over 2 years. She claimed it was because I seemed lonely, but the truth is, she was obsessed with me and couldn't bear to share me with another person, so she had to be a very important person in my life. We're both women and family, so it was really twisted to find out this information. It genuinely messed up my perspective and trust in relationships for years afterward. Story 29. The dumbest thing I ever did was move deep into the mountains with a guy I'd been dating for only 3 months. Not quite Alaska-level wilderness, but very damn close. It became very unhealthy, gained a ton of weight, and stopped taking care of himself. I was no longer attracted to him whatsoever. When we met, I was drinking a lot and doing a lot of substances, and that's how our relationship began. It's almost like when I opened my eyes, I was in the middle of nowhere with a guy I didn't even like. He had a very moody personality and a hard time getting along with anyone. I didn't have the strength to leave due to deep codependent issues, low self-esteem, and so on, so I spent 3 more years moving around and being miserable. Somehow, I finally found the strength to leave, probably because he became absolutely unbearable toward the end and my family hated him. Now I'm married to the man of my dreams, but boy do I regret wasting those years with someone I never should have been with. Story 30. I moved into a new apartment that my girlfriend and I had picked out. She was finishing her lease in February, but I needed to move by December, so we decided I would move in first and she'd be added to the lease after she officially moved in later. This apartment was closer to where my girlfriend worked at her request. It was also newer, much bigger, and had a spare bedroom, all needing to meet her rigorous standards, which also meant it was too expensive for me to afford by myself. I moved all my stuff by subway, making multiple crosstown trips with big suitcases by myself because she was busy even though she had offered to help drive. At the time, I was living in Japan with no license. Then I had to rent a van and ask a coworker to drive so I could move the big stuff. She also couldn't help that morning because of her work, but I got it all done before I went to work. Honestly, all of this was fine. These were circumstantial problems or not that big of a deal to me then, and still not that big of a deal now. If it wasn't for the fact that when I got off work and raced home to clean up from the move, she showed up with a bag of oranges and broke up with me pretty much right away. Then she cried in my arms because she was sad we were breaking up. Like, what? That situation quite literally ruined my life for a bit. Not because of missing her or any BS like that, but the debt I went into trying to get out of that apartment, the stress, the depression, the excessive weight gain. Oh, and did I mention this was December to February, right before lockdown hit, so I literally couldn't move because no apartments in the city were taking foreigners out of fear. God, I'm doing so much better now, but my life would be very different if it wasn't for her. Maybe better. Hell, maybe worse. I try not to dwell on it. Story 31. In my first major relationship, my girlfriend blogged about every small thing I did, right or wrong, to all her friends on her Tumblr. To this day, I hate couple influencers where the girl has a camera on the guy, constantly testing him with stupid logic games or showing off how great he is. It all circles back to being half boastful and half invasive in my head. I've never been able to shake the idea that for some women, relationships are performative. Things like the soft launch drive me absolutely mad. It's like these women are billing themselves as viewed entities, and this is coming from a young man who grew up with wanting to be famous, without fully understanding what it entailed. I do have this strong aversion to the way some women operate that I know I need to address in therapy. Story 32. I am from Hong Kong, so our medical schools are undergraduate entries. Before I sat for the public examination, my boyfriend told everyone he knew that I was a future doctor. Cringe. When I received my exam grades, it was clear I couldn't meet my medical school conditional offer. He ghosted me about a month afterward, right when I finally decided to forfeit that university entry, take a gap year, and do another round of exams for other systems. It was painful to have someone you thought loved you end up bailing out at your lowest. During the relationship, he kept using POA, pickup artist tactics on me by demolishing my confidence in what I loved and constantly pressured me for intimacy. And no, he's not a medical student or a doctor. I was just some economic student who couldn't secure any decent internships at major firms in the city. This haunts me to this day. During my gap year, whenever I saw anyone that vaguely looked or had a profile like him, I would have a panic attack. I was later diagnosed with PTSD as I couldn't deal with the constant panic attacks and had one major mental breakdown. But I'm glad this diagnosis makes me functional again. Story 33. In my last relationship, my girlfriend fell in love with someone else while on the job. She came out and told me about it. I was only 18 in my senior year of high school at the time, and she was about 21. I didn't know how to feel about it. I felt that if she fell in love with someone else, there wasn't much I could actually do. I was mainly focusing on graduating in October of 2003, which is when it happened. She also told me that she was getting married in April of 2004. And the day of her wedding, I was attending my 12th grade literature class, fighting back tears. My teacher comforted me with some advice after I told her why I was crying. On a piece of paper it said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Keep yourself busy and love will come around to find you." That was over 20 years ago. I've kept busy trying to achieve my goals, and to this day, I'm still single. I went through my 20s without a relationship, and I'm approaching my 39th birthday this year. Looks like I'm about to end my 30s without going into a relationship at all. I think one of the main reasons why I took it hard wasn't just the fact that she married another guy, but she didn't give me a slice of the wedding cake that she promised. I could have taken that as a consolation prize. Where's my gosh darn cake slice, woman? Story 34. They were long distance. He dumped me out of the blue 2 days before I was meant to move to his country. He simply said, "I can't do this. I don't love you anymore." With no explanation besides that. I lost everything. Apartment, job, and work visa. I was already working abroad. It not only crushed my heart and soul, but left me scrambling to figure out how the hell to survive in a country that wasn't even home for me. I had incredible friends who helped me a lot, but I ended up moving home after 2 months due to awful mental health and coping mechanisms. He contacted me a year later and admitted he had a girlfriend the whole time. I just don't understand why he'd ruin my life like that. I guess I was just that insignificant. Things have looked up since then, though. I'm engaged and have a baby on the way. Things do get better with time. I try not to think about that period, but it pops into my mind here and there, and I still feel so much anger. Screw you, Dirk. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.
What was the weirdest thing you've seen someone fake for attention? A boy I went to elementary school with faked being taken in the middle of the school day. He disappeared for hours. The whole school was in a panic, especially his mother, who was a teaching assistant. They eventually discovered him passed out in the woods near the school. He claimed that one of the Hispanic construction workers who was across campus working on a new building had taken him and left him in the woods. However, he did not have any signs of being taken. He was just covered in dirt. His mother was immediately suspicious of her son's behavior, not sure why, and told authorities she thought he was lying. The construction worker he blamed had several good alibis. He had a special trade that made his whereabouts particularly important for the project they were working on that day. The cops investigated and his story quickly fell apart and he confessed to making it up. I'm not sure why he did it. I went to school with him for years after. He was a weird kid and acted out on other occasions for attention just to a lesser degree. He had great grades too and seemed to have a very loving family. Well, I feel awful for his mom and the construction worker especially. At least the mom sounds like a good parent by admitting that she actually thinks her own child was lying. Story 2. A girl in high school made one of those anonymous confession pages and posted a bunch of posts about her secretly being a witch and having intimacy with John, James, Jim, and basically any popular guy you could think of. She was a quiet girl who was in a marching band and she was kind of goth. She got made fun of for being a weirdo, so I guess that's why she started the page to write the confessions. We only ever found out it was her because someone snuck up on her in the library once, saw her making a post on the page, took a photo of it, and posted it on Facebook with her account tagged and everything. She was extremely humiliated, and even the teachers gave her some questionable looks. She ended up switching schools for her senior year. It was just weird that she did that because she did have a good amount of friends and was nice when you talked to her. I guess she either wanted people to think she was intimately active and or make the popular guys look bad by getting everyone to think they slept with the weird gothic band chick. Story 3. I was watching this movie with a big group of girls. We were all in our late 20s except for one girl that was 19. The movie had this scene of my friend who has experienced an awful experience quietly got up and excused herself, then returned when the scene was done. The 19-year-old asked her why she left, and she told her. About 30 minutes later into the movie, there was another scene. The 19-year-old was giggling, then randomly threw herself on the ground and started screaming. We paused the movie and tried to talk to her, but she started hurting everyone. We all just walked away to leave her to do whatever she was doing. 1 hour later, she came outside angry that no one tried to console her like we did our friend. My friend quietly excused herself and never asked to be comforted. She didn't make a scene. We tried, but she heard us. There was a scene that didn't bother you. How were we supposed to know a regular scene would trigger you? She left and called us witches. Her cousin, my friend, later said she typically does stuff like this for attention. Story 4. A friend of mine used to make up relatives and talk about them on a daily basis. She apparently had an aunt that worked for the Rolling Stone and would come into school saying her aunt interviewed Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, insert famous rock star here. We both used to use DeviantArt on the regular, and she actually made an account for her aunt and commented as her. Also claimed to have a cousin who was in the SAS and would legit start the waterworks claiming he was leaving the country for his work. Even faked a boyfriend at one point, fake Facebook profile and everything. Always had an excuse for where any of them were whenever one of us would visit her house, despite them apparently visiting almost every day. These three were just a few of the supposedly massive family she had. No idea why she did it, and eventually these family members just faded out of existence. We never heard about them again after secondary school. Deep, deep loneliness probably. And she probably wishes she had people who loved her as much as they did. Story 5. So, guy at my last job would claim to have seen or done anything if it helped him fit in and relate. He was a compulsive liar and would claim all kinds of stuff independently, like being an EMT, owning a construction company, having a band, the usual stuff, I guess. You could name any weapon ever and he owned it. If you wanted to see it, too bad, he sold it last week. He even claimed to have had a Sea Regatta once upon a time. Yeah. Anyway, his big thing was mirroring, so when he found out I used to work at Chipotle, lo and behold, so did he. Now, my Chipotle was tight. We were family, not like when the HR rep says it in your interview. We actually partied together, bailed each other out of jail. We were a squad. Some of my friends had been there since the store opened and no one remembered him. We even pulled the personnel files. I know, shame on us. Wonder of wonders, he never worked there. He also claimed to have beaten his bad habits after finding out about me beating mine. 8 years now, thanks. It's nothing really. He was all proud of me and, hey, let's have this camaraderie, The Chipotle thing was the worst to me, though, not just because he pretended to have worked there. One of our OG Innermost Circle people had some stuff happen in his life and eventually chose to end it. Chipotle actually pulled managers across state lines to cover shifts so everyone could be at the funeral, which was amazing. All I can say is that I'm glad we were all so close, or I don't think any of us would have ever recovered from it. Now, the bad part, when I spoke to my manager at my new job about the funeral and taking a few days, the liar asked what was up and if I was okay. So I just called him out with remember B, his name. He just got taken off life support after his attempt. He's gone. Dude didn't miss a beat. His face fell, his eyes welled up, and he tried to hug me. I was so blown away that he was even attempting to fake this thing that I literally never spoke to him again. Not even to tell him why, and we worked together at that job for months before he got fired. Story 6. Had an online friend from overseas fake an entire life. We didn't figure it out until months down the road. She'd faked her age, 2 children, including pregnancy and birth of the second, a husband, an entire husband's friend group, all with interacting Facebook profiles, her wedding, her passing that turned into actually an abducting, her triumphant return to real life when she was rescued a couple months later, etc., etc., etc. All this over the course of several months. My friends and I literally mourned her passing when her husband, actually her on a separate profile, told us she'd been ended. We'd had Skype calls, always voice only, where we could hear the kids. Turns out they were kids she was babysitting. She was using someone else's children and pretending they were her own. And we didn't figure it out till her return and we started reverse image searching her wedding photos. Come to find out, she'd stolen them from some photographer's portfolio. This was 10 plus years ago, and I still have trust issues with people on the internet because of it. Less dramatic, had another online friend fake a mistreating parent. I called CPS on the family. I don't play around with that stuff. She got mad at me and cut off all contact with me. Now, how dare she follow up on mistreatment and report it? Come on. Story 7. I'm a high school teacher. When students talk about ADHD as an excuse to not do any work for months, it's so frustrating. Sure, we'll give you the grade after your parents call the school with equally weak excuses. Let me let you hand everything in and take days out of my life to grade just your work so that you can move on from my class that you didn't deserve to pass. The line between those who truly suffer from ADHD and those that take advantage of the system is so thin that it's hard to not see it in a negative light. The amount of hardworking students that I've had with ADHD proves to me that it shouldn't be acceptable for those who are not hardworking to be able to coast. Once parents call the school, it becomes so political that teachers are the ones that ultimately get stepped on and are forced to do the most work. It really is the parents, to be honest. Sorry to everyone else who raises their kids properly with or without ADHD. Your child gets less attention than the fakers. Story 8. Went camping with a group of friends once, all hammered. One girl who was already like super cringy and posery fell into the river, soaked in ice cold water. So the guy she'd been flirting back and forth with helped her into the tent and helped her change into dry clothing. We were all laughing at her outside the tent for about 10 minutes when she burst out of the tent screaming that the guy did something to her. We all kind of looked into the tent to the homie who was completely clothed and just shook as we were. This guy is a real down-to-earth guy and I would never believe he'd do something like that. She basically cried victim so we'd stop laughing at how she fell into the river so we'd all feel bad and coddle her. We're 100% certain he didn't do anything to her because we could hear them talking and she was thanking him for helping her. We heard their entire conversation in the tent. I'd pretty much cut ties with that friend afterwards, but I've heard through the grapevine that she'd cried victim in other situations since then too. Story 9. I had a friend in high school who made up everything. Her most persistent lie was that she and her family used to live in Texas and had a farm neighboring George W. Bush's before he was president. She said that their cow ran over his fence and that he joined them for Thanksgiving dinner. Also came to school one Monday saying that she was adoptive and that over the weekend her biological parents had found her and given her a bunch of money that she used to buy 3 mansions. She had photos of the mansions that were obviously stock photos. Then we had a culture fair at our school, and one of the fun facts at the Mexico booth was that the driving age there was 13. I haven't fact-checked this, that's just what the poster said. Suddenly, she'd never mentioned this to us before, but she used to live in Mexico and had driven there. Alright, if you're connecting with any of these videos so far, I'm pretty sure at least one of them is like made you shake your head. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 10. I went to college in far northern Wisconsin. There was a girl from North Carolina there who claimed that she was dating the center for the Duke basketball team. I thought it was unlikely due to the geography of it, but stranger things have happened. The thing that made me doubtful was her appearance. Most of the basketball players I'd seen at high-level programs were dating women who looked like models. This girl, bless her, was not a model. She was a very large girl. She also had a rotten personality. Someone dared question her about the truthfulness of her claim. She went crazy denying that she was lying. She got really weepy about it and cried all about how people didn't believe her. She provided pages and pages of emails back and forth from her to the guy. Over the next few weeks, she started forwarding his emails to those of us who had expressed some doubt, which was pretty much everyone who knew her. Some people were really mean about it, though. Then one day, we got a message forwarded to us that was supposedly written by the guy, but we noticed that it originated from her email address. So we knew she was lying. We figured she'd try to tell us about why it had happened and that it was really him. Nope, she wrote to everyone she'd sent the first one to and explained that she'd forgotten to change the account before she'd written the message. After all the fuss and crying and screaming, she just abandoned the whole idea. Yeah, she wasn't well. Story 11. Kid in high school were just draining for this stuff. His family was wealthy, so he'd always want to flex new possessions and stuff like that to be popular, but he'd also just make stuff up. Back when Apollo Ono was a huge thing, he claimed he was getting into speed skating and had his professional skates, or blades, or whatever the proper term is, and was baking them and was getting great times. Hang out at his house and asked to see them. They're being mended at the specialty shop. Claimed his dad got him an NSX. We were all barely 16 years old. And every time we asked how it was, there was a new excuse about how the dealership was having delays. After a couple of months, we recommended he contact the Better Business Bureau, and he was like, yeah, might have to do that. Then we all just stopped talking about his non-existent car. Finally, one day we were talking about skipping class, and he recommended going to his place because he had apple pie, and another friend said, you don't have any apple pie, do you? And he forlornly went, no. Story 12. Claiming that someone is faking attention because they were jealous that someone was getting more attention than them. People rarely fake for attention because if someone is going out of their way to get your attention, then they probably have something going on worth that attention. That reason can include their mental health. If someone mistreats a child in a Munchausen by proxy situation, is their mental health unworthy of attention because they are soliciting attention from you? People need to get over this idea that someone is somehow unworthy of attention. Your attention ain't a prize, and treating it as such is what motivates people to behave in this way that irritates you so much. Acting out is a cry for help. You can either provide that help or contribute to the paralyzing toxicity that is currently gripping our species. Story 13. This'll probably be lost in the comments, but there was this one young kid I used to work with. I'd say he wasn't the most popular guy, but that would be an understatement. He was downright annoying. Naturally, he didn't have a lot of friends, but one day, let's just say he had an accident, which caused everyone to laugh. Well, they were more laughing at him than with him, but he loved the attention for a change. This unfortunately set him on a path of doing more and more bizarre things for attention, until one day it culminated in an ambulance getting called. It's a beach town, so it's not uncommon to run into people you know there. We were all out one day, and all of a sudden whistles are blowing, lifeguards are running, and they're pulling this kid out of the water. And wouldn't you know it, it was the same kid. No idea what had happened, but as he's lying there and an ambulance is pulling up, he weakly calls for the lifeguard to come over and says, I need a tailor because I ripped my pants again. And that's the story of how he lost all of his friends. Story 14. My best friend in high school pretended to have leukemia. This was around grade 11 or 12, so I didn't know much about it. She would say that she got treatment at our local hospital before school and then come in right after. She once had a tube of ointment with a RX label pulled off and said it was her medicine. She was my best friend, so I had no reason to question her. It wasn't until I was at a routine doctor's appointment that I learned the truth. I broke down sobbing that I was scared my friend would pass away and told my doctor everything that my friend said. My doctor looked so sad when she told me that our local hospital doesn't have an oncology unit, and there's no way my friend could have treatments before school and still be well enough to attend. I was devastated and wanted to confront her, but I thought about it first. Finally, I realized that someone who would lie about something like that was probably pretty fragile, so how would she handle being outed as a liar in front of all of her friends? In the end, I decided it wasn't worth the risk and didn't say anything. I just stopped hanging out with her and slowly pulled away. I was hurt, but the last thing I wanted was for her to hurt herself because I revealed her lie. Though the petty side of me still wishes I could confront her about it. Story 15. There was a girl at my college who lied about everything for attention. It would take an hour to detail it all, but here's the one that she tried to involve me in. Now, I'm 99% sure she was pretending to be bi. I'm pretty sure she was actually straight. She was a new freshman at our religious college. I was a junior and pretty involved with our GSA club. She made some friends who brought her to the group one day, which is all well and good. The reason I think she was faking was because of the objects of her quote-unquote crushes. She was in love with her straight female friend, a non-straight woman in a committed relationship, the other half of that committed relationship, and me. Always seemed pretty sus to me that all of her non-straight loves are people she would never in reality have to do anything with. And she was telling at least a few of the group members we were in a relationship, which I thought was funny. Approximately 0 people believe that. I wasn't even mad when I found out. It was just wildly unrealistic. It was a pretty small school, and the attention of the group, all very sweet people, plus attention from being queer in a small religious town and school, must have been catnip. Story 16. I work in physical therapy, and it's actually quite common, but so messed up how people fake their injuries to get disability or money from the settlement. Patients are quite obvious when they are faking it because you ask them to do any single thing and throw a fit, claiming they can't do it and ow, it hurts. Example, just something as simple as stretching. Patient complains they can't do it while 2 seconds ago they reached far to grab their cane with no difficulty or bent down to greet a child in the lobby. You see them get in and out of their tall vehicles, no issue, etc. But as soon as they step in my PT room, they put on an act. I wish I could just tell them to their face how I know they're scamming, but for obvious reasons, I can't. I love my job and I adore helping those who actually are in need. I'm just stating the fact that people scam all the time and are terrible at faking. I don't treat patients any differently and work them all out accordingly, though. Story 17. All 4 years of high school, I was friends with a boy with an extreme case of pathological lying. He lied about everything, big or small. My entire friend group would just roll our eyes and ignore what he said most of the time. From claiming to owning a bakery at 15, to telling us he was flying around the world for his rap career, dating models, and apparently having celebrity friends. I think he said all of this because his older sister was pretty and popular, and well, he wasn't. I always felt really bad for him trying to overcompensate in school. And the tough thing was when we hung out alone, he was super sweet and open about personal issues. Things really took a turn right before senior prom where he started acting super catty towards me, and my friends and my friend group decided to stop talking to him because of his toxic behavior. Unfortunately now, 3 years post-high school, I've only learned the extent of his lies towards his girlfriend at the time, a dear friend of mine. From what I shrugged off as knowing lies, my friend never got that. She took everything he said to heart, and apparently he would psychologically torture her with claims of mental illness, cancer, and other crazy things. Now she's overcoming a lack of trust towards anyone. I think dealing with attention seekers is really difficult, but not really talked about. Story 18. I was a new kid during my last year of high school because I moved across the country. That's mostly unimportant, but relevant to the story because I didn't know anyone at this new school. In our class, my group mates were discussing haircuts, pulling up pictures of bad haircuts we'd had in the past. I pulled up a pic on my phone of a buzz cut I had, and this one girl in the group said, "Oh, did you have cancer?" I laughed because I swore she was just making some joke, but she was being serious. The bell rings for lunch a bit later, and another person in the group says to me that the year before, that same girl got a shorter haircut, pixie style, and told everyone at school she had cancer and had a few months to live. It got so bad, apparently, that the school contacted her parents about it, and she got in trouble with everyone for lying. Her asking me if I had cancer because of my buzz cut still weirds me out.
What's the worst case you've seen someone trying to play the victim when it was all their own fault? Story 1. So, a few years ago, there was some Facebook drama involving a girl who had left a bar drunk and backed her car into the car of an acquaintance while exiting the parking lot. The next day, she went off on him for telling the police that he saw her do it despite knowing she was poor and could have just said he didn't see it and had his insurance paid. She kept digging a deeper hole and all the replies were like, "Witch, don't drive drunk." It was glorious. Story 2. A local business owner and friend asked a lot of his regular customers to invest in his new business in Atlanta by buying shares. I bought in, knowing we wouldn't break even for at least 3 years, but that he could still sell religion to the Pope. We had losses for 2 years, broke even at 3 as predicted. 4 years in, he closed the Atlanta store and opened in another town, but this time he was doing it all with his own money. No way. He was doing it with the inventory and proceeds from the Atlanta store. He even had a shiny new house, cars, and the works for his new venture. He was shocked to the core and hurt when all the shareholders took him to court. Story 3. An older lady walked into a construction area where she knew she wasn't supposed to go just to snoop around when the workers weren't there and then sued because she slipped on a plastic floor covering. She worked there. She knew the area was off limits. She did it anyway. Story 4. When I was teaching, I had a student I adored who had some behavior problems. I did everything I could to support him, One day we were taking a test and he was talking. I reminded him several times that talking during a test is not allowed and I would have him go in the hallway if he continued. He continued talking, so I told him to go into the hall. He called me autistic on his way out, his favorite insult, so I wrote him a referral. I called his parents and they didn't answer, so I sent an email explaining what happened, that he got a referral, and that I hope we can work together to help him manage his reactions. His mother responded saying that my behavior is unacceptable and that she is done speaking with me and I will hear from her lawyer. She went all the way up the district level to complain about me, telling all sorts of lies and making me look like a horrible person. I don't teach anymore. Story 5. I was in a crowded parking lot driving around looking for a space. There was one car ahead of me. The car ahead of me stopped, so I stopped as well. I'm not sure why she stopped because there was no empty spaces and no one was pulling out, but whatever. Then, before I even had time to react, her reverse lights came on and she came flying backwards towards me. I didn't even have time to honk. She slammed into the front of my car, got out of her car, and started screaming that I hit her. When officers arrived, she was crying, shaking, and complaining that her neck hurt. She cursed me for slamming into the back of her car. Thankfully, 2 people had been walking through the parking lot when this occurred and told the officer what really happened. Later, the driver of the car that hit me tried to tell her insurance company that I knew the witnesses, and that's why they lied. I didn't know the witnesses, by the way. At any rate, if the witness hadn't stuck around to give statements, I'd have been screwed. Story 6. My best friend's ex-girlfriend was kicked out of her parents' house when she told them she was a lesbian. She moved in with my best friend since they were dating at the time. At first, she told my boyfriend that she was too depressed to find a job. My best friend was okay with that, even if it meant she'd have to work more, which she did. She even found a second part-time job, and for the next 6 months, whenever my best friend asked her if she'd found the job, she'd always get the "I'm too depressed" response. Eventually, my best friend finds out that her girlfriend cheated on her. Her excuse for cheating was, "You're always at work and never have time for me. I need someone who will be there for me." My best friend kicks her out, and then her ex blames her for having to move back in with her parents. The kicker? It turns out her parents never really kicked her out. She was just tired of them telling her to get a job. Story 7. Sometimes my children ask me why they've met my mother but never met my father. I tell them he died a long time ago, when I was a kid. In reality, though, my dad used to be an abusive drunk, and my mother had to kick him out because he used to beat on us kids. We used to spend weekends at his new house, but around the time I turned 10, he told my mother to stop dropping us off and gave her a shoebox full of all the pictures he had of us. We tried calling him on holidays every now and again, but he finally just told us to stop contacting him altogether. Last year, my mother passed away. He decided to reach out to me and express that he had changed and wanted to make things up to me. I told him it was okay, filled him in on how I was doing in life, and sent him pictures of my children. But I expressed that I was already a man and didn't need a father anymore, and he was forgiven for the 20-year absence. He then proceeded to tell me that I'm horrible for pushing him away and abandoning him, that he was dying and that he just wanted to fix things. So I just explained to him that it was already forgiven, but he abandoned me and I had no time for his foolishness. I wish things would have been different, but he's too much of a bad influence to allow in my children's lives. Story 8. An employee was being fired for a multitude of infractions at a coffee shop. He had been caught by management calling customers things like dumbass and stupid creep under his breath, and several customers had also reported the behavior. He was constantly late, would leave early, or beg others to cover his shift. Instead of restocking or cleaning the area during downtimes, he would take out his drumsticks and practice, which annoyed the other employees and customers. During inventory counts, we noticed whole pallets of sandwiches or baked goods were missing, as well as bottled drinks, etc. We were mysteriously out of huge 5-pound bags of espresso roast. The numbers weren't adding up. He was subsequently fired after being caught bad-mouthing a customer while a visiting manager was also in the cafe. The guy didn't know it. The guy blamed all the issues on everyone else. Late to work turned into, "I missed the bus," or "My roommate forgot to wake me up on time." Leaving early turned into, "Well, I got a call for a gig. There was a concert I wanted to see." Food missing turned into, "I didn't have money to eat, and it's the company's responsibility to ensure I'm fed while on the clock." And calling customers names turned into, "They misunderstood me." Management would say, "What part of calling a customer a dumb freak is a misunderstanding?" Followed by, "It's not my fault, they're so sensitive." All this dude's problems were blamed on everyone else, and all his issues and the situation in his life were blamed on everyone else again. We employees stopped inviting him out because at bars, he would order drinks, tell the bartender one of us was covering, and skip out or leave rapidly before the check was presented to us. He'd also walk around tables when people got up to dance or talk in a group and guzzle down their drinks. He was an all-around shy person. We found out after he was fired from a store that he was hired by a Starbucks in the mall who failed to call for a reference or check, even though our store was listed as the previous place of employment. He was caught stealing money and food from there too. I wanted to add that this was our worst employee. We had another guy who worked his ass off but had generally a bad demeanor, but he was a solid, hard worker. One day, he sat down and watched the drummer dude spout his mouth off and treat customers like filth and turned to me and said, "I hope to God I don't sound or act like that." And just from watching this one guy, the other employee became a model customer service employee almost overnight. Also, we had another guy there. He went by some weird animal name instead of his real name. He was sent home for showing up drunk several times and was let go after management found he snuck a bottle of vodka in and was adding it to girls' drinks during the late shift. Story 9. My brother-in-law, my wife's brother, believes that everything terrible in his life is the fault of others who conspired to be mean to him. He blames others for his drug problems and feels that the government should never have taken his child away from him since he believes he is a good father. And according to him, his disabled mother, who had custody of his child, made up stories about him hitting her and the child. So when the government told us, both APS and CPS, that we had to protect the child from him, he felt that we had no right to take his child away from him, even though he hadn't had custody of the child for years. He lives off of disability benefits due to back problems he got from a beating he received for running his mouth at the wrong people, despite his doctor's advice that he doesn't need a wheelchair and can work. He feels that it's our fault that he can't pay his bills even though he still lives rent-free in his mother's house, and he spends his disability checks on drugs and junk food as soon as he gets them. He believes that we have abandoned him to die and are terrible people for not letting him live with us. However, the government placed his mother and child in our care to keep them safe from him. He came up with a scheme where he called 911 to be taken to the local hospital and told them that he was dying because he was wheelchair-bound and abandoned in a squalid house. The house became squalid because he refused to clean and had a dog he never let outside. He managed to get Adult Protective Services to call us and tell us that we had to take care of him and fix up his house. However, we live 250 miles away in a different state. We explained the situation to APS and gave them the names of the caseworkers for his mother and son, who know him well. APS confirmed our story, but he demanded that they file a court order to force us to allow him to live with us, which was not possible. He became belligerent and screamed profanities at everyone in the hospital when he heard that we had refused to take him in. When the doctors told him again that he didn't need a wheelchair, he screamed at them. And after about 8 hours, when he still refused to leave, security had to drag him out and dump him into the parking lot. A few weeks later, he called us, begging us to pay his bills, and went off again about how we had no right to take his child away from him. He believes that we're terrible people because we refuse to acknowledge what a good father he is. He lives in a poor county in the rural South where it takes immediate danger to life for CPS to take away a child. However, they took away his child and even permanently removed his custody rights. They also determined that the child and his mother were not safe in the same house as him. He believes that we, quote, stole his kid. But despite my reluctance to raise another child, I am now raising his child because I can't turn my back on them. However, my brother-in-law believes that this is all a vast conspiracy to spite him. Story 10. I am so glad when I see these questions because I can talk about my sister. She's always been a loose cannon, creating chaos wherever she goes, constantly playing the victim and thinking the world owes her everything. Anyway, one day she calls my mom claiming the place she was staying was a cult. Weird, right? But we don't ask questions. She also claims that she was sexually abused by someone and he is following her. Okay, who's going to believe anyone who says that? She also claims that she's been watched by some weird government agent. Anyway, after all of this, my mom says she can stay with us temporarily, and my sister says a maximum of 2 weeks. Okay, for reference, my mom and I were living in an apartment that had a total of 5 rooms, a kitchen, a small random area that was 10 by 10, a bathroom, my room, which was a living room, and my mom's room. So basically, we had no space. Also, my mother has no money at all. She has just enough for rent and food, but that's with me even chipping in some every now and then. But she is family, and so I don't mind sharing my room with my sister for just 2 weeks. So she gets there and right away says she has no money, but she wants a job where she has to take the turnpike to a highly populated city, so my mom gives her change jar for tolls only. It should have been about $5 a day. My sister uses 80% of my mom's change jar within a month's time. She was using it for gas, bills, food, anything and everything. But whatever, right? Damn, but whatever. There's nothing to call the constable over. Then she says, I still haven't found a place to live. I need 2 more weeks. Okay, fine, but you need to start helping us pay bills and such. She has a fit, freaks out, and says the entire family hates her. Whatever, perhaps she's just being dramatic. Mom gives her leeway on the bills until my sister feels more financially sound. Then my stepdad unexpectedly dies. My sister didn't even like my stepdad, so she's basically like, whatever, he's dead, and my mom is obviously torn. Her best friend died. So my sister goes into my mom's room 2 days after he passed away and says, Mom, you should go into a mental hospital. You're having a psychotic break. Excuse me? She said this because my mom had been crying since she found out he had died? Obviously, who wouldn't? Then my sister invited her children to come and live with us, her 12 and 19-year-old daughters and sons. And where are we going to put them? Who's going to pay for them? She didn't even ask. Then she posted something on Instagram with a sexual reference. I, being the youngest, commented like, lol, you, like I always do whenever my siblings make comments about sex. It's kind of a fun thing between us because my siblings laugh and I laugh and it lightens the mood. She starts acting really nasty to me though, telling me that my niece and nephew hate being there because of me, that they don't like me, I'm making mom's life hard, etc., all because of my comment. Eventually, all hell breaks loose and my sister is screaming and fighting with my mom, telling her the nastiest stuff, refusing to leave, literally going crazy. Hitting stuff, throwing stuff, threatening suicide, saying everyone hates her, telling my mom she was the cause of my sister's hard life. Like, what? And all this stuff that is just too long to write about in a Reddit post. So my mom says, you've been here for 2 months and haven't helped with the bills. You have to go. She refuses, calls the cops, claiming we are unlawfully trying to evict her. What? Anyways, my mom finally just told the landlord she couldn't stay there because of my stepdad's passing and that she was leaving. We all came, packed up my mom's stuff, and left. I don't know where she went after that, but I haven't talked to her since. She still claims that the family hates her because of me and my mom. She claims we didn't help her. She claims that the house fell apart because of me. She claims we all should have done more for her. She claims we don't love her and XYZ is why. She's the worst version of a human I've ever come into contact with. Story 11. Not the worst case I've experienced, but when I kicked my abusive ex out of my house, he started playing the homeless victim card pretty badly. Understand, when I kicked him out, it had been 10 months since we broke up. He strong-armed me into letting him live with me when I got a better place and he got kicked out of his friend's house. I was the only one working. He refused to watch our child while I was at work. He would get aggressive and violent if I even talked to another guy. And there were multiple cases of my best friend and only ally having to basically kidnap me to get away from him and keep me safe. Yeah, it was all just a messed up mess, but he started telling everyone I was this crazy, horrible person, how I kept him from seeing our daughter and how I was being a witch because I was jealous. For years afterward, everyone believed him, and I lost every friend I had. Thankfully, this story has a happy ending. It's been years since this happened, and now I'm in a healthy, happy, and safe environment. I met and married an amazing human being who held my hand and had my back when I started going to therapy to heal the wounds that were left, and he is the father of my youngest. My daughter is now 9 and is amazingly sweet and a strong girl, and I have an amazing group of friends who are the best support team anyone could ask for. Story 12. I was drugged by one of my religious leaders at around 20 years old, and to help me cope with it, I started seeing a therapist and made a dedicated journal for all these dark thoughts. Instead of trying to tell myself, I'm okay, life's okay, yep, it didn't happen, I'm fine, I could write all the deepest, darkest stuff my brain was thinking. I didn't tell my wife about my event, but she has a tendency to be snoopy. I am constantly waking her up about 2-3 a.m. to go through my phone, so I told her about the journal. I made it clear that it is one thing under no circumstances she can read, that it is extremely personal, and if she wishes to read it at some point, she needs to talk to me about it and I'll decide if I feel it is necessary or beneficial. Of course, one day she comes out and says she read it. The excuse was terrible and she's mad at me that I didn't tell her sooner. She believes that, as my wife, I should be comfortable telling her anything and everything. As the following weeks go by, I'm very angry with her, And she remains adamant that it was my fault because I didn't tell her sooner and that I should change my stance on things I tell her. A few months go by and I'm still upset. Our relationship is still rocky, and she says, "Oh, wow, I thought you were over that by now." To which I reply back with, "No, of course I'm still upset. You betrayed my trust." She responds with, "Oh, I thought you were over the journal thing a while ago. I thought you'd be over your event by now with the therapy you've been doing." This woman was as insensitive as it gets, and needless to say, she's now my ex-wife. Story 13. My 50-something-year-old mom's very frequent non-sober calls and hysterics about how her life is ruined. This was after she turned our lives upside down with her alcoholism and drug abuse throughout our childhood, went to rehab 5 times and relapsed every time, was given literally countless chances by my dad and family to start fresh, including an amazing job and housing opportunities, nearly bankrupted my dad, forced him to move and raise 6 children on his own, and eventually lost relationships with all of her family and children except me, up until 2.5 years ago, when I received a call that she messed up again, got herself kicked out of her free housing arrangement, and lost her job before it even started, forcing me to go pick her up on the side of the road and crash at my apartment for the night. I remember when I was scrambling to hide all of the alcohol and pills in my place before getting her, then picking her up. She cried that my dad was still ignoring her and wouldn't give her money anymore. It really hit me that I'd finally had enough. Victimizers, am I right, guys? Story 14. My cat plays with the closet door and sometimes shuts himself in. Then I get an angry cat yowling to be let out, and he acts like I'm the one who locked him in there. Or maybe it's just cats who want to leave the room right after they enter. I open the door and he just looks at me and meows. Usually, he just wants to be picked up and snuggled, but I can only do that for so long. He probably also wants food, as cats are just food screaming machines. But I don't want to overfeed him and make him overweight.
He passed away 2 months after. I think it's partially the shock of the betrayal. He was one of the kindest, most patient, and most reserved men I knew. He would go out of his way to move mountains for people with a smile on his face and truly no expectation for anything. I guess that naivety is why he loved my grandma. I knew my grandmother was sort of a witch, but only then did I truly realize to what extent. After that, she also got too senile to properly hide it. Any shred of love for her I had just evaporated. She can be gone as far as I'm concerned. Story 3. My mom told me a month after my kid's dad passed away that any survivor benefits I got should be signed over to her to pay her back for the things she paid for while I grew up. This time I didn't know if my kids would get them. He worked under the table for years, and who thinks taking money from their grandkids is okay? The thing she paid for was housing and food. Once I got a job, I had to buy all my own school supplies, clothes, feminine products, etc. A month later, she told me she needed money for a car and knew I had it. I didn't, and would be over to pick up the money when her boyfriend got home. I hung up on her and haven't talked to her since that day. 11 years and counting. Story 4. Ex-roommate stopped paying rent and blocked the landlord and everything. When the landlord forced me to be the middleman, he lied to my face about not having any money left. Can't afford food, a whole sob story. So I bought him groceries and got in contact with his parents to express how worried I was because I could see him spiraling. His parents told me they sent him rent plus a few hundred extra every month. To this day, I don't know where the money was going, but he was 3 months late on rent. On the day the lease ended, he moved his stuff out and left garbage everywhere and food rotting on the fridge. I spent nearly 2 days cleaning by myself, but had a job waiting for me and ran out of time. So everyone lost their security deposit for the apartment being trashed. And when I confronted him, his excuse was, "I can't be in that place anymore. I'm putting it behind me." 1 month prior to all this, I'd have called him a best friend. Now if I think about him too much, I get so angry my hands start shaking. Story 5. I lost a good friend after a roommate experience as well. Agreed to let him move in at an incredibly low room rental rate for LA, basically enough to cover a wee bit of the total rent and the increased utilities. Within 2 months, he'd gone fired from his job and made no effort to get another one. Also, I knew he'd have his toddler daughter occasional weekends. Truth was, it was every weekend. Friday morning till Monday night. And when he wanted to bring his girlfriend over to get hammered, he'd just lock his kid and her barely walking baby out of his room to wander my house. Evicting him was a nightmare, too. He, 40 male, brought his mom to help him move the day before I was going to file eviction paperwork. I watched them try to steal my things, and she yelled in my face about what an evil witch I was to kick her son out. I'd known this guy since we were in junior high together. Petty revenge. His ex asked me to testify about his awful parenting during a custody hearing. He doesn't have to worry about those weekends anymore. Story 6. I have a cousin I used to like. Active in veteran support circles, had been honored at events in baseball and hockey games. Lots of fun, non-judgmental young veteran. The family's golden boy. Especially compared to his younger brother, who others saw as a black sheep who liked to cause drama for no reason. Became even more of a hero after being diagnosed with cancer, presumably as a result of the burn pits in Iraq. I found out last year that he had mistreated his younger brother as teens, which I found out directly from the victim's cousin. And thanks to our state's laws, is bringing charges against his older brother, despite how much time has passed at the recommendation of his therapist. Not only that, but I found out that much of his service in Iraq had been wildly exaggerated, like desk work in a secure area during the relatively peaceful period after Saddam's fall. And a lot of his posturing as a spokesman for veterans was actually him taking credit for the real work being done, his younger brother, a victim, an Afghanistan vet. The guy can pass away from his cancer now for all I care. And honestly, it might be the best outcome for him at this point. Story 7. Former best friend. I supported her and gave her a place to stay so she could work in my city. At the time, we were working in the same field with complementary skills. We made a great team. Until the lockdown hit and I was laid off from my company. Her company went remote, so she moved back to her parents' house. I asked her for help, just looking at my resume or my freelance work for her opinion. She would brush me off continuously. Then her company needed a freelancer, so she tossed me some work, which I was extremely grateful for, and knocked it out of the park, and her boss loved it. But she started withholding project information from me, and I found out she was telling them to pay me less, and going in to sabotage my work between me submitting it and her giving it to the boss. By the end of our friendship, I was depressed, unable to find a job because of the lockdown, and when she tried to underpay me, I quit mid-project and haven't spoken to her since. I've been a lot happier. Got my freelance work published several times over, and I'm applying to grad school in my dream field. Last I checked, her company made her the sole person in her position and laid off half the staff. Story 8. My buddy had been in love with this girl for years. We'll call her Angela. Angela and my friend had great chemistry growing up and eventually started dating. It seemed meant to be, really. She eventually moved off to college, out of state, across the country. In fact, they tried long distance. She came back to her hometown to visit, and everything seemed normal, until my buddy was contacted by some random guy on Snapchat. This rando told my buddy that he was also in a relationship with Angela. It had been for months. We couldn't really believe it, so we asked for proof, and we came to find out Angela was on his family Christmas cards. Though it gets worse, or better, if you think it's funny. The rando comes with more information, claiming Angela had actually been in other serious relationships and had multiple other people she slept with for substances and money. Then after dropping that bomb, the rando also claims she dropped out of college and is actually moving back into her hometown to escape her college town because of the situation she found herself in. Angela also stole $500 from the rando before making her way back to her hometown, along with thousands of dollars from her other boyfriends and plugs. After all was said and done, she fled home once again and moved to California, last I heard. She broke one of my best friend's hearts, and it was truly one of the most painful things I've witnessed. Story 9. I have a coworker that is recently out of a long prison sentence. I did my best to tell him he was on the right track and that I thought he was a good person regardless of his past. I took time out of my day to drive him home because he couldn't get a license because he had several DUIs over a decade ago. It is about an hour round trip every day. I also took a personal day off to take him to get his license when he was finally allowed to get one. It took all day. That's a full day that I didn't get paid. I bought him lunch on several occasions because I knew he was behind on bills. I got him a nice Christmas gift to help him get started with his job, to invest in some stuff for work. He's never returned favors or reciprocated. We were good buds when working together. It was usually more fun working with him and made the day go faster. One day, I asked my boss if he could help me pack up some of the stuff we had at a job location that we had been working at for 2 weeks. I wasn't going to be able to finish up the job and make it look nice, and pack up all the stuff before the store closed. He gets there and immediately starts giving me crap, like full-blown yelling at me because he had to take time out of his day to help me with my crap. It was actually the company's crap. It almost came to blows. I won't stop helping people, but that's the last time I will help him. Story 10. I must have been about 16 at the time. Was drinking beer around a friend's house I always used to cycle to and from school with. Spent loads of weekends chilling at his Xbox and just generally vibing with him and his sister. This particular night was his birthday and we had a couple other friends over, one of which was a girl who had recently broken up with her boyfriend. We were still pretty young, so she did not handle her drink well. As the night goes on, he's increasingly creepy towards her. I always knew he fancied her, but until this point, he kept it relatively hidden and non-creepy. It was when she was in delirious tears and slurring her words that he started to give her more drink. I told him she's had enough, and I'll walk her home. His response to me through a harsh whisper was, "Dude, screw off. I'm trying to get with her here." I instantly punched him 5 times. I remember each one clearly as they wiped the disgusting smirk off his face. The party quickly disbanded and another friend and I got the girl home safely. When we were in school, the word spread pretty quickly. Said I threw wuss punches, which was quite funny, considering he said that with a black eye. Glad I did what I did. I'm picturing the disgusting smirk just melting with each punch. Poetic justice. Story 11. 2 of my second cousins. Both are siblings to each other. Mary has 2 kids and cheated on, that we know of, 2 of her ex-husbands. Tom was sent to prison for buying and distributing. He was also a schmuck to his mother, and is still a schmuck to his mother despite being out of prison on good behavior for around 3 years now. Why do I hate Mary now? She allowed him to babysit her 2 girls, 11 and 4, while she and her new husband, the father to the youngest, went on a cruise. I've lost respect for both of them. I truly hate Tom and Mary both. He's a messed up individual, and she's just stupid and endangered her children. Story 12. I became friends with this guy in 8th grade, but our friendship ended freshman year on Halloween night. I was going trick-or-treating with some friends and my sister. He didn't have anyone to go trick-or-treating with, so I invited him to come with us. Everything was fine until he started being edgy and made jokes about people with autism and disabilities. Then when he saw someone dressed as Elmo, he screamed, "Dictator Elmo!" We were all getting scared because he was screaming all this stuff around children, so we all decided to go home. But while we were going home, he kept walking into the street and moving cars. My sister told him to knock it off because if we get in trouble, then she's responsible because she's the oldest. Then he said to her, "Shut up, witch." That made everyone in the group turn against him. My sister got angry and stormed home while the rest of us followed her and tried to get away from him. When we arrived home, my sister immediately went to her foster mom and told her what happened while one of my friends already went home and the rest of us didn't talk to him for the rest of the night. He acted like it never happened, or that it wasn't a big deal to him. I ignored him for the rest of the year while he kept trying to be friends with me. It's senior year and still aren't friends, and I would like to keep it that way. Story 13. My maternal grandmother, on her last breath, after battling cancer for 10 years, tried to make me promise to never date black men. I tearfully responded, at 15 years old, "Oh, Mom, I'm black too, and I'll never promise you that." She didn't care if I went to college. She didn't care if I pursued my dreams. She didn't care if I was happy. The woman that helped raise me used her final moments with me and on this earth to remind me of her vitriolic discrimination rather than encourage me in any way. This moment tainted every fond memory I ever had of her. I can't say that I miss her. For context, I am biracial. My father is black and my mother is white. I have lighter skin compared to my other 3 siblings. She had previously tried to convince my younger brother that he wasn't actually black, just tan. He has suffered identity issues for the rest of his life as a result. Story 14. Tried asking my best friend, who also happened to be manager at the time, what was wrong when he came into work in a particularly bad mood and it destroyed a friendship. He's usually quiet when he's in a bad mood, but that day he was trying to push my buttons and say personally hurtful things about me and people I cared about. At the end of the day, I tried taking him aside and talking to him about it, and he told me nothing was wrong and continued treating me poorly. He was mad at me for it. I ended up not moving in with him, which we had planned for a while, and also got a new job so I wouldn't have to work with him anymore. We haven't talked since I got my new job. He ended up getting fired from his manager position because of his attitude, and he lies to people about the entire situation like I'm some horrible person. I guess I wouldn't say I hate him because I do wish him well, but I will never, ever give him any more of my time and energy. From best friend to workplace enemy real quick. Talk about a mood swing. Story 15. I've shared this story before on Reddit, but it fits this question so well. I had a friend in another country who would use my visits there as cover to cheat on her husband, i.e. dropping me at a mall or movie theater, etc., and then going to the nearest motel, and who visited me on my home turf only to disappear for 2 days to fool around with some loser she'd been talking to online, leaving me to field an awkward call from her husband about why she wasn't answering her phone. Why did I remain friends with her, you ask? She had seen me through a very bad time in my life, and I also don't tend to make friends easily, so I wanted to hang on to one of the few I had. Cue to a year or so later, when my father passed away and I was naturally not online very much for a while, eventually logged into a news group that she and I both belonged to. And the first thing I saw was a vitriolic rant she had posted there accusing me of wallowing in loneliness because I had not been online to talk to her. Why did you know my dad had passed away? Yes, she did. At this point, all bets were off. I blocked her on every social media site where I had an account, and then I emailed her husband from a throwaway account, giving him chapter and verse of when she cheated on him. He took their kids, and the 2 of them are now divorced. Petty or childish on my part? Guilty as charged. but she deserved it. Story 16. I had a coworker that I liked. We had a lot in common. We were around the same age, same background, both loved animals, similar taste in music and movies. We'd eat lunch together and chat from time to time. We didn't hang outside of work, but she was a good work friend. One day, after about a year, we were having lunch and talking. She mentioned she was upset because a city bus route was changed and it put the stop near, but not in front of, her house. She lived on a street that was a gateway to a very wealthy area, so many of the workers for these multi-million-dollar homes, maids, nannies, groundskeepers, etc., would ride the bus to get to their jobs at these homes. She was upset about this change because, in her words, now all the poor people will be hanging out near my house each day waiting for the bus. Ugh. I paid too much for my house to deal with that BS. I had to lift my jaw up off the floor. My opinion of her changed from that point forward. I'm guessing she was like that all along, but finally felt comfortable enough to say that in front of me. Disgusting. Needless to say, I backed off the friendship and just kept things professional with her from that point on. I didn't want to be associated with her. Once I left that company, I never saw or heard from her again. Goodbye, good riddance. Story 17. My mother ruined my wedding. She mistreated my wife and her family, tried to engineer problems between me and my grandparents because she was mad I invited them, her parents, to my wedding. Threatened to make a scandal during the ceremony. She got uninvited from the wedding, obviously. Showed up anyway, started hunting me from room to room a few minutes from the ceremony started, leading me to take 3 shots of tequila just to calm down and not break down at the altar. Got intercepted by the 2 security guys I hired last minute just because of her, and locked her in a room that had a view on the ceremony while my grandma bought me down the aisle instead of her, obviously. That was nearly 10 years ago. I've been waiting for apologies ever since. Instead, I got more cruelty. Blackmail attempts, gaslighting, threatening emails. She got sick and survived. Huge bummer. Screw her. I'll have a smile on my face the day she passes away. Alone and miserable, having never met her grandchild who I'm protecting from that psycho. Story 18. The person I was with at the time didn't like the dog that she had to have when we went to the shelter. We didn't live together, but whenever I would go see her, she did not want me to see the dog because she will whine and I'm not dealing with that. Anyway, she had enough with a stupid dog and invited me down one weekend to help her take the dog back to the shelter. She took the dog back without me and told me that the shelter said it was full. If she returned the dog, she would have to put that dog or another one down. She did it anyway. It was not an instantaneous hatred, but it was quite the epiphany. Gradually began seeing her as a monster. Story 19. I wouldn't say this made me hate the person, but our relationship definitely changed. I'm mixed race, for context. I had a great uncle who was white. I was always interested in aviation and even got my pilot's license before epilepsy put an end to that. Anyway, my great uncle had flown in the military and worked with a local nonprofit that maintained and flew old military craft. I spent a lot of my childhood with this man. Really encouraged my interest in flying. I got to go up in a lot of cool craft, and he bought me my first headset when I started flying. Anyway, one day when I was about 16, we took a day trip to Canada with my grandparents, my great uncle, my other great uncle, and my great aunt. My grandpa was driving and there was a guy riding his bike in traffic, outside the bike lane, leaving quite a bit. My grandpa asks, "What in the hell is this guy up to?" My great uncle responds, "What do you expect? He's black." I didn't say anything, but everyone else in the car got on his back. After that, I wasn't as close with him and would find excuses not to spend time with him until his passing. I just couldn't reconcile the man I thought I knew with the casual prejudice he apparently was. I mean, what did he really think about me all those years? If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 20. My dad. I got along fine until I, F, went to high school and puberty and boys started happening. It was like everything we had enjoyed together meant nothing. We used to sit and play Nintendo together, watch movies. He wanted me to enjoy Star Trek, but suddenly his attitude toward me changed completely. Everything we did together after that turned into a lecture of boys only want one thing. I trust you. It's them I don't trust, etc. He did his best to scare away every male friend I had. He listened in on every phone call I had with my first boyfriend and would actively tell us mid-conversation that it's time to hang up now. As I got older and graduated high school, he told me one day I was looking at colleges that didn't raise a loose woman for a daughter, and that I should look into all-girls schools. One day after I fell victim after fighting with a guy, he called me a loose woman again when I came to him for support. I effectively cut him off out of my life at that point. Story 21. I'd been best friends with a guy for all my life. We even went to kindergarten together, and later on, we ended up in the same class together for almost 10 years. But then he ended up dating a girl that also was my best friend. The guy, after a while, started to act kind of weird, being silent and all, not talking to me like he used to, But then one day I got a message from him where he explained that he could not stand the thought of me being friends with a girl because I was probably going to sleep with her. He banned me from seeing her, and I had been her friend for over 6 years and had no thought of dating her at all. She helped me through some tough times and was really nice, but I wouldn't date her, especially since she was dating my other best friend. It all ended with a guy banning me from seeing the girl who was really in love with the guy and did what he wanted. So I said that if I couldn't hang out with her, I would not hang out with him either. So here I am, alone, and hate the thought of that I was so close to him, and over a weekend our friendship broke apart entirely. Story 22. She told me and my boyfriend about how her sisters did these terrible things to her when she was a kid, and then she cut her family off, which is understandable, until one of her sisters confirmed that she lied about the terrible things they did to her. At first, I was like, "Are you sure you're not saying this just to cover your back?" But as I listened to my old friend talk about it, I realized the story didn't really add up. I did start losing respect for her before finding out about the lies, when she went from being an actual friend to being the schmuck who goes, "Hey, can you give me a ride from Driftwood to Lockhart at 10 p.m. while it's raining?" Or, "Hey, can you buy me a vape? By the way, I'm in New Braunfels right now." But the thing that made me really start on adding her from stuff is when she decided to have a baby without money, a plan, while housing hopping with sketchy dudes. It's a shame because she didn't come off as a schmuck at first. Modern friendships. Story 23. My uncle is my relative. His wife is not. I'm not around them much, but every time I hear stories about things they say, my hate for them grows. The first instance I knew I hated them was as follows, even though I wasn't present for this. They liked me for some reason, and would never speak this way while in front of me. My mom went out to lunch with them once when they were visiting from out of state, and I don't remember how it came up, but my aunt said that the middle class are a burden on the rest of us, and continued to talk about how poor people ruin society for the next hour. They're not that rich. Upper class, but not rich enough to be saying crap like that. My mom left that lunch in tears. We're not wealthy. My mom raised me all on her own. We're usually in a pretty tight budget. I had respect to my mom. I've hated my aunt ever since, and my uncle was on thin ice, but has since broken that ice and embedded himself on the frozen substrate, never to resurface. Story 24. I'll do the reverse one. How I made a person who really cared about me to hate me. I was toxic AF. Controlling, manipulative, and liked to give random tantrums like a child. Sometimes I was a good girlfriend, but honestly, the moments I wasn't were more. Poor guy. I hadn't let him breathe for nearly a year. I didn't understand that he had a life besides me, and I wasn't the center of the universe. I was lazy, so not only did I not do anything in my life, but I didn't let him, too. I was such a schmuck and childish girlfriend. We were on vacation with some friends of ours with whom we rent a holiday house, and I gave a tantrum because I wanted to get the main room. The other rooms were beautiful too, but I just wanted that one. I'm ashamed of what I've done. So childish to give a tantrum in front of others and for a really stupid thing. I didn't realize that the only important thing was to share some quality time with this person and create good memories to share in the future. Instead, if you will ever think back about our relationship, I don't think so, I'll remember how horrific it was. Well, he realized I wasn't the person he wanted to share his life with. I was too dramatic over stupid things and understand it only now. He started to hate me for having hurt him all this time. It's been some months since our breakup. Somewhere he's doing better without me. Maybe he isn't happy yet because he's still recovering from this traumatic experience, but at least, I hope, he's living peacefully. Story 25. We were best friends in kindergarten. Then we got put in different classes after that. He fell in with the jocks, and I fell in with no one. As stereotypical as it sounds, the jocks would make my life hell and he would sit back and watch or join in. Then senior year, he tried to be all buddy-buddy like nothing had ever happened, and I lost my crap on him. Nothing physical, just a bunch of words, but boy did it feel good to get everything out. After that, he realized he messed up. I guess because he was scared that all his friends were abandoning him because they were going to different colleges, so he didn't want to be alone. Well, after being civil for a while, I came to find out he found religion. Good for him. And I found out it was the hateful type of religion. Not good for him. Then he acted in that hate. And being a member of the group, he committed a hate crime against just kinda ever so slightly rubbed me the wrong way, so I cut ties for good. The only time I hear from him are when my mom tells me he posted to wish me happy birthday on Facebook. Pretty sure he wouldn't be wishing me a happy birthday if he knew about me. Story 26. I have an older brother close to me in age. When we were kids, I followed him everywhere. His name was the first thing I learned to say. We had an unconventional childhood with some severe cruelty and neglect, and we'd go for huge walks to get away from home and just talk about the BS. Over time, we got separated a bunch by him going off to prison. He had one bag of grass on him, and he ran afoul of a Mormon judge who was there to scare him straight. I visited when I could, called when I couldn't visit, sent him money for the commissary when I could scrape it together. Not a ton of money,
I was poorer than dirt, but whatever I could. For years, I would Western Union him 100 here, a couple hundred there. I knew he was a user. He made connections in prison and sold stuff later on, and of course, ended up using it as well. But I just kept trying to help. I tried sending gift cards after a while, and it became clear that he was recycling the same excuses and garbage, and he stopped contacting me. Our mom passed away. In itself, a good thing. The world became slightly safer that day, and I moved heaven and earth to arrange for funeral in Canada, though she passed away in Idaho just so he could come. I had to borrow a minivan from an in-law, get some weird permits for transporting, all this crap, bought him a ticket and arranged a taxi and did all this crap. Meanwhile, he's alternating calling everyone in the family, getting angry and claiming we stole her insurance. It turns out she had a $500,000 insurance policy but had canceled it to send him money a few months before passing. You wouldn't believe it. He also refused to come to the funeral. I managed to get back almost all the money and buried her in Idaho instead. He called my wife at the time and pestered and threatened her. I called him and told him, "Look, I offered to scrape together a $20,000 funeral while making a very low hourly wage." And he laughed at me when I told him how much I made per hour. Man hasn't worked a legal job at that point for a decade. Screw him. He was my best friend, my only partner in hell. I would have literally covered stuff up for the guy. I did everything I could for him. He's gone to me. The man he is not the boy he was, and I don't plan on ever talking to him again until he's in the ground. Story 27. My dad passed away in November 2012. We were incredibly close and had a wonderful relationship. I was absolutely devastated, and 9 years later, I still have days where I miss him so much I cry all day. My ex-husband told my mom that my dad's passing was really hard on him and they needed to snap out of it. My grief. My ex had met my dad 6 times. In that instant, I hated him. Granted, I had other things that contributed to me hating him, but that was really the final nail in the coffin for me. Taking my loss of a beloved parent and making it all about him and how he filled me with a white-hot hatred that still burns. I've since remarried to a wonderful, kind, nurturing man, and I'm living my best life. But I would still hit my ex with my car if I saw him walking down the side of the road. Story 28. I spent most of my life caring for my physically disabled mother. She meant everything to me. I would have, and did, give anything and everything I could to help her. She now has someone else caring for her, so I was finally able to move on with my life. I was getting married a while back. While my mom there, I made the comment, "Everyone needs to be immunized, of course." Thinking that my mom, who always made sure we had our shots as kids, would surely be immunized. Oh, I'm not getting the immunization. If it is my time and God calls me home, no immunity will stop that. Told her that is literally the point of the immunization. Well, I don't have the money. So I told her it was free, and she argued that for a long time. I don't want it to change my DNA. Only God can give us DNA. I told her that isn't even a real thing. She said she would not get immunized, and it was wrong for me to try and force it on her. I told her if she won't get immunity, she can't attend. She said, "If you don't want me there, then just say so. Don't make up excuses." I told her that I just want her to get a free immunity that could save her life so she can see her son get married. She said I was trying to come between her and what God has told her is right. In that moment, I realized she put her own religious BS over the wedding of her son that gave up so much of his life for her. She didn't get immunity, and my mother did not see me get married, and I haven't spoken to her since, and don't care if I ever hear from her again. Story 29. Hate is a strong word, but a recent event seriously changed my feelings for a family I used to see often as a kid. They're my parents as friends, and I played with their kids when I was a kid. The kids are grown and have families now. I don't really see them for the last 20 years or so. One of their family members, an uncle of their family who was really cool when I was a kid, was recently depressed and basically ended it all by refusing to get treated for a chronic disease. It happened both suddenly and slowly. Started over the summer and got to a point where he was not seeking treatment, so they asked me to talk to him as a medical professional. I hadn't seen or talked to the guy for 25 years. Long story short, he refused my help. I went back to the family and said, "You guys need to basically drag him to the hospital. He also needs to talk to a therapist." 3 weeks later, he passed away alone in his home. They did nothing. He would dog sit for them, babysit, do their landscaping. He had a family literally a few blocks away, and it is a huge family. Like it's a really big family that is fairly close. Just let the guy pass away. Now they feel guilty. All I could say was good. What a tragic and preventable loss. Story 30. I had to disown my lifelong best friend. I was 37 when I did it. We'd been BFFs since 5th grade. Drinking turned him into an absolute piece of human garbage. I have dozens of stories that all warrant disowning him, but the tipping point, when I realized that the person that used to be my best friend is gone and that there's just some terrible person wearing a skin suit around, now was this. I had a mutual friend who was in town for her last remaining family member's funeral, her grandma. Her mom and dad and brother had all passed away separately in the last few years, so this was a huge, heavy deal, and also the last time she would ever have a reason to come back to her hometown. Well, we all went out to a bar. As the drinks kicked in, my ex-friend's switch flipped, and she started in on his standard ranting about how whoever his target for the evening is going to pass away alone because they are a piece of crap that no one will ever love. Except this time, he picked the girl in town for her last relative's funeral, and a table of like 6 of us watched him stand up in the middle of a crowded bar for literally no reason whatsoever and scream at her about how she's a stupid witch that deserves to have no family because she's an unlovable, selfish piece of crap that is going to be alone. Everyone at that table had been friends with each other for like 15 years. We all grew up together. We were tight as heck. Everyone but me hated him from that point on, and none of them have spoken since. I still lived in the same city as him, so I gave him a couple more chances due to proximity. But it just got worse. He has no remaining friends. He's in a super cruel relationship, and he blames all of his friends for abandoning him. He's incapable of admitting that he's the problem. I could write a book on how evil this schmuck became as he grew older and more bitter. I know he uses Reddit, so hopefully he sees this. Screw you, Dan. You need rehab, and you need serious mental health care. Story 31. A 2-for-1 here. Flaming rage I've never imagined I could feel towards another person before, and now I've got 2 targets. When 2 of my siblings' spouses cheated with each other, and other people, and gaslit my siblings. They had been family, and then when their actions came to light, they're as good as gone to me. They're now ex-spouses, and apparently we know the following because co-parenting still has to happen, which sucks that my siblings can have distance from their oppressors. Confused about the reality my family hates them and acts like they don't exist. The 2 siblings who are the victims here are literally the nicest, most loyal, down-to-earth people I've ever known. Apparently that type makes perfect targets for narcissists. Story 32. 2 of my friends dated on and off since high school before moving in together for maybe 6 to 8 years. She had a special needs daughter from a previous relationship who lived with them. The dad wasn't around much, and my friend was basically the only man in her life from like ages 5 to 15. At 15, she was probably at the developmental age of an 8-year-old. When they broke up, my buddy just packed up and left and never talked to the kid. A few days later, he asked her mom if he'd passed away. I literally gave him the come-to-Jesus talk a couple weeks earlier about just sitting the kid down and letting her know what was going on, but he never did. It didn't make me hate him, but I did lose a hell of a lot of respect for him. We're still friends, but not like we were before that. Story 33. This one happened a week ago. To add context to it, I grew up with a physically and verbally cruel father. He towered over me. Him being over 6'5", and I was a little kid, so there wasn't anything I could have done to stop him. To make things worse, he had me so traumatized that I had never told anyone about it until he passed away and I was 15. Now we were having a conversation about standing up for ourselves at the table. I can't remember why. When suddenly my brother says, "What would you know about standing up for yourself when you couldn't denounce what her father did until he was already gone?" At that point, I was not only furious, but hurt. He basically called me a coward for being terrified to speak. I haven't spoken a word to him since then. Story 34. My ex accused me of cheating on him constantly. Late coming home from work, despite working in EMS and never having an exact time off. Cheating. In fact, anything slightly different from my own schedule was seen as definitive proof that I was cheating. Even being asked to come in late. I hang out with my best friend without him, even though he doesn't like her and wasn't interested in what we had planned. I'm cheating. Someone compliments me on Facebook. I obviously am secretly dating said person, but if I had the slightest issue with any woman he was speaking to, even one that had sent him pictures and expressed that when she slept with people she was thinking of him, I was controlling and won't let him have any female friends. And the thing that made me absolutely despise him was that he was talking to an ex-girlfriend, one that he had always talked about how he will always probably love her. Story 35. I had a very talented assistant during her work contract. When she graduated school, I hired her for a higher level position in another contract I was also working on. The manager asked me my opinion on whether or not we should rely on Wish to deliver some items with a time-sensitive deadline. And when I disagreed with him and said I didn't think that was wise, he quickly decided I wasn't worth his time. He started leaving me out of company meetings by giving me wrong dates or times, falsifying information that was supposed to have come from me, and repeatedly lost confidential paperwork I'd given him. The assistant had gotten the job. I texted her one day to ask how she was settling into her role because I know it can be rough working in such a fast-paced environment. I know I've struggled sometimes. And she sent it to our manager and implied it meant I was struggling with the job and not pulling my weight. I got pulled in for some kind of reprimand or final warning meeting, but she was also present at. She was silent the whole time. didn't make eye contact with me, and when asked to verify the absolute pile of lies this manager was spewing, she backed him up. I walked off the contract that day and never spoke to her again. I was floored because I'd spent 2 years coaching this kid and helping her become an incredible employee, and she ended up betraying me for absolutely no gain on her end. Story 36. To set the scene, I was 24 years old with a toddler and another one on the way. Married. Both kids were wanted and planned. No oopsies. We had a nice life. Decent little house, good group of friends, hobbies, decent jobs. We were enjoying life. My deranged mother got brain cancer. She was single and I was an only child, so caring for her as she very quickly went terminal fell on me. It was a terrible caregiving experience and not something I'd wish on my worst enemy. X decided he was being neglected. X cheats with girls who met on his trekking route. My mother was suffering from terminal brain cancer and he cheated on me because I was too busy for him. Between taking care of the suffering parent and keeping our kids alive. We divorced after she passed away. He ditched the plant kids with me and hasn't seen them in a decade. We haven't heard from him in a decade. He still tells people I stole them and won't let him see them. I know this because every so often someone reaches out to me to tell me what a monster I am for stealing his kids. I hate him. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.